Do you enter other people's homes as a part of your job? What's the craziest thing you saw? I was on a ride along with a fire department. We responded to smell of smoke in an apartment building. We found the apartment fast enough because the fire alarm was going off inside. We walked in to find this guy as exposed as the day he was born, passed out on the floor in front of the TV with adult movies on way louder than they should be and the remnants of a pizza in the oven. The gentleman in question was very drunk. There were beer cans all over the kitchen and a bottle of liquor on the floor next to him. To wake him up, we actually all left, and the fire chief woke him up in his daily uniform so he didn't think he was being abducted. Lastly, this was in Fargo, North Dakota, about 14 years ago. So this isn't so much weird, but it was the most shocking. I was working with adults with intellectual disabilities that lived in residential homes. It was one of my first weeks on the job, and a coworker was taking me out to a home to show me what she did when she did home reviews. We got to the house, opened the doors, and we were instantly hit with a wall of air smelling like poop. 2 steps in, and it was apparent there was diarrhea on a chair, on the carpets, and random splotches all over. The whole house was in shambles. The fridge was full of moldy food, and I'll never forget picking up the shredded cheese, shaking the bag, and seeing green mold flakes go up and down. Food was spattered all over the cabinets, the beds were stained with pee and poop, and expired canned food was everywhere. The staff there had been neglecting those guys for a long time, and nobody had bothered to check up on them. Service plumber here. At the house of an elderly lady, at least 75 years old, there were undressed pictures of her on the walls and several marital aids all about. It was interesting. My parents have a friend who commissioned a portrait of herself undressed from the waist up. She and her husband hung this giant professional portrait front and center in their living room and have since their children were young. They are interesting people. I do construction sales, so I'm in homes a lot. For me, it's the sheer number of preppers that exist. Walk into a suburban America basement and bam, 24 buckets full of survival food or ammo stuffed into every alcove and rafter. It's definitely not just the ones you expect. I do insulation and I've sprayed some impressive prepper spaces. My favorite was a 1,200 square foot house with a 2,000 square foot basement, concrete ceilings and walls. Part of the area was under his porch. It was a dang bunker. The guy even installed hydraulics on the vault door. In case the house falls on it, I can still open the door. This is really interesting. A couple of bills from The Last of Us in the making. Wild that so many people have the end of civilization as we know it on their minds to such a degree. Can't imagine having the time for that. I used to work for a concrete company, and our mixer trucks would sometimes damage property. Typically, my partner and I did maintenance on the plants, but we'd get sent to job sites to unscrew whatever the drivers did. So while at one house, we had to tear up a driveway, replace the culvert, and re-pour the end of the driveway. The first day we were there, all of the old snoopy neighbors were standing around watching, and I had to pee pretty bad. So I asked the homeowner if I could use the bathroom. He said, sure, and led me through his house, past the bathroom, into the bathroom in the master bedroom. Already creeped out by that. Oh, and also I noticed cameras all over the place. Some pointed out of windows, some pointed into the rooms. Creep factor leveled up. He leads me into the bathroom, opens the door, and holds it for me like you would at a store when someone's behind you. I say thanks, and he just stays standing there. I had to walk past him and yank the door closed. While leaving, I notice a bedroom decked out in kids' stuff. This would not normally toss up any flags. Grandkids' room, probably, right? But with all the added creepiness, it just didn't seem normal at all. I told my partner. He laughed and pointed out there was probably cameras in the bathroom. If either of us had to pee after that, we drove down to the gas station. So this was around 15 years ago. We're talking camcorders on tripods, not your cutesy nanny cams. The old guy was single, and this wasn't a very kid-friendly setup as far as foster homes go. Back in the early 90s, I worked for a company that removed old electric water heaters and replaced them with propane-powered ones. Because propane water heaters can possibly spew carbon monoxide, there are state regulations as to where the heaters can and can't be placed. So it was my job to inspect the water heater room and draw up plans for ventilation, if necessary. I showed up at a client's home to inspect the area where he had his water heater to see if we needed to install any vents. When I asked to see his current water heater, he seemed a little uncomfortable and said, I have something in the room that I forgot to clean up. I followed him to the room, and when he opened the door, the smell of green herb hit me. In this room, he had fishing lines strung up with trimmed plants being dried. If I were to guess, there must have been a couple of pounds of ganja drying up there. He said, "Oh, sorry about that," and I smiled and told him, "No problem, I don't even know what that is." I knew exactly what it was, but I didn't want the guy to get worried about me telling someone else. He offered me some, but I told him, no thanks, don't know what it is. As I was leaving, he asked me, you aren't going to tell anyone about the plants, are you? I asked, what plants? The guy smiled and then said, you sure you don't want some? I definitely wanted some, but I was still pretty new at the job, so I didn't want to take the chance that accepting Mary J from him would blow up in my face. Before I left, I told him, make sure you clear that closet before our guys arrived. They might not be happy about the plants that I didn't see. As a maintenance guy at a large apartment complex, I've seen some stuff. Undressed people, really gross people, but thank God, no dead people. I remember doing an emergency water repair, and I had to go into an occupied unit. It was the strangest thing. It was pretty much empty, dirty, but empty. Like nobody lived there. No furniture, not even a bed, just a crappy mattress on the floor, and some clothes scattered around. At least 30 pairs of Nike shoes, all sorts of weird colors. Like this guy had no TV or couch, but had a collection of expensive shoes. All the same size from what I could tell. I don't know, it wasn't as bad as a few of the hoarder units we had. Worked as a furniture delivery guy for a rent-to-own place in Iowa for a couple of years. I saw some absolutely crazy stuff. We were delivering a couch to someone, and when we arrived, there was no answer to our knocking. We called our manager back at the store and explained that nobody was home. He tells us to hang out for a minute while he tries getting in touch with the customer. While we're waiting, we start hearing this weird sort of screeching sound coming from a detached garage. We decide to investigate the house. We turn the corner to the front of the garage and come face to face with the meanest, scariest-looking monkey I've ever seen. It was in the garage, but they had like this wire fence keeping it inside, and the entire garage was its cage, in the middle of BFE, Iowa. I have no idea what kind of monkey it was. It was very large and very angry. Checking fire alarms and testing emergency bedside buttons in a nursing home that are like individual little apartments. Opened the door to the stench of death, and sure enough, lady dead and on the bed and had been there for about 2 days. Yes, the bedside button worked fine. No, nobody was in trouble for her not being found for 2 days. This specific place is very independent. They have their own cars and are free to come and go as they please, and the only time someone comes by is for some sort of maintenance or if they have visitors stop by. This lady had 7 huge birds, parrots and stuff, all without cages and crapping directly onto the floor. It only had the pad that goes under the carpet, and everything had seeped through. It was horrible. She just got a German Shepherd puppy as well, and then proceeded to show me her machete collection. Had a dope classic Airstream in the backyard though. My coworker called animal control on her, but we ended up closing her case shortly after, so not sure whatever happened. I can smell and hear the noise from a 7-parrot household, and it is giving me a headache and making me nauseous. Also, I just had to Google what a classic Airstream is, and assuming I found the right thing, that is one cool campervan trailer. Maybe that's why she was letting animals destroy her house. I worked as a delivery driver for a Deliver Anything company in the early 2000s. At the time, it was a very novel but ultimately unsustainable idea for a business. We had a lot of regular weirdos. One night, one of those weirdos ordered about $30 worth of candles from the dollar store. This job really brought to the forefront the disconnects that exist in us as consumers. So of course, initially, I'd gotten the wrong kind of candles for the weirdo. He showed me what he wanted at his apartment door. Luckily, the store was literally a couple of blocks away, so I didn't have to waste much time because I wasn't being paid hourly. Come in, is what I was greeted with when I returned, which is never something I'm particularly happy about as a delivery person. I see what my rational brain tells me as a pile of laundry on a coffee table in front of a filthy couch. But it's not that. It's a 3-foot-tall wax pile. I'd bought candles in jars the first time, and I could definitely see why those wouldn't work for our gentleman. He needed freestanding candles, so he could just plop one down and light it to continue building his wax mountain, which was starting to spill onto the floor. A less weird but more awkward experience I had with this man was him literally falling asleep mid-signature for his Burger King. A plane. This guy was refurbishing a light aircraft in his lounge. It was only the fuselage, the wings were outside. That certainly was the weirdest. I mean, that's actually rad, but weird that he did it in his lounge instead of outside under a tent or in a garage or something. On one occasion, we were demolishing a kitchen for a remodel, and we found, sealed inside the wall, 5 empty beers and 1 full one. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to install smoke alarms for the hearing impaired, 50% elderly and 50% deaf, all over the state of Oklahoma. I'd get addresses for the installations the week before and plan routes accordingly, meaning I'd just put the addresses into Google and check everything out on Earth and map views. This place I'm thinking of was in the middle of nowhere, which is saying something considering the entire state of Oklahoma is in the middle of nowhere. When my ASL interpreter and I made the trip, we had to ramp our minivan over the nearly washed-out bridge, bounce down a forest road, and choose which of 3 broken trailers these people were using as a shelter. Looking back, we really should have just called it before ramping the bridge. Once there, we met the people and they explained, in ASL through my interpreter, that they'd had a tornado rip through their home that ended up sparking a fire somehow, and that explanation never made it through translation. Since then, they'd decided to be more fire safety conscious, which I applaud, but their home had holes in the roof the size of people. One wall was just a tapestry of duct-taped trash bags. I didn't feel right just installing fancy smoke alarms when they clearly needed much more help, but there wasn't anything I could do, really. So I'm doing the only thing I can do, installing the smoke alarms and explaining basic fire safety, teaching them to use their bed-shaking devices. These people were deaf. When I started to explain that they should exit the home without stopping to grab anything valuable, including pets, and they stopped me and explained that their pet is very valuable, as in it had monetary value. I'm not one to pry, so I took this at face value and reiterated the importance of leaving the home immediately if it's on fire, especially because it's a trailer home. They had a long, silent conversation with my interpreter, during which she looked more and more concerned. The occupants go into a room that I hadn't entered yet and emerged with a frickin' bald eagle on a leash. That's illegal, guys. I had a neighbor who offered me money to clean her apartment. She had mental health issues and got some kind of subsidy from the county for home assistance, which she didn't like, but she had an inspection coming up for continuing her other benefits, so I walked in and there were dishes everywhere, glasses with dried stuff in the bottom, pizza boxes that smelled of old cheese and stacks, ashtrays piled so high they were pyramids of butts, beer cans and bottles scattered. Went into the kitchen and both sinks were piled up past the faucet. One side had water in it that was covered in a white film. The kitchen trash had overflowed to the floor and had flies buzzing around it. Gross, but I needed the money, so I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. After I got the dishes under control, I moved on to the stove and oven. When I opened the door, the entire bottom of the oven was crawling with maggots. The wave of smell was enough to knock me on my butt, and I ran out gagging. I went home, got a mask on, went back, and finished cleaning up. I still can't figure out what she did to that oven. There was no food inside, and it looked like it had never been used. Not exactly weird, but cool. Knocked on the door and didn't get a response. The door was unlocked, so I let myself in to find a 90-year-old woman in her dressing gown headbanging to Led Zeppelin. I was an estate agent, a realtor for rental properties, and I had a few wild moments. The top 2 were when I'd been okayed by a member of a male couple to let myself in for a flat viewing one Saturday morning, but he must have forgotten to tell his partner, because when I opened the door to the bedroom with my heterosexual middle-aged potential buyers, we found one of the tenants having a vigorous affair against the wall without a stitch on them and only 5 feet away. Still no idea how we didn't hear them before we opened the door. The other one was similar, but I was there to take photos, and the tenant, an elderly, overweight woman, forgot I was coming, so guess who I found in the bath? I'm trying to think if I really were set on buying a place, would I be completely put off by the visual of someone desecrating their marital vows against the wall? You know what? I can't put my finger on why, but I think I wouldn't be able to see the place the same way afterwards. I used to be a house painter. One weekend I was working with my female coworker at a house for a woman and her toddler daughter. The daughter was chatty and cute, mostly sat on the couch watching TV, but would talk to us while we worked. I was on my knees painting some trim with my back to the daughter when she said, "Look at me!" I turned around and saw her on the couch wrapped in a blanket. She opened the blanket and said, "I'm not wearing any clothes." I immediately turned back around and said loudly, "I don't need to see that." From the other room, her mum yelled out, "Is she taking her clothes off again?" At the end of the day, we were laughing about it with the mother, and I said, "She's going to be really popular when she gets older." Luckily, the mother took that joke well. I worked for Pizza Hut many years ago. I had to deliver to a house that was as normal as can be on the outside. I knocked on the door, and a guy was wearing only silk boxers when he answered. He was slightly overweight, but looked like he was smuggling a frickin' baseball bat in his boxers. He was casual as heck and asked me to step inside for a second as he had to go get his wallet. I took one step inside and this extremely hot lady came around the corner. She was obviously not wearing a bra and her robe was barely closed. One of her steps forward flapped open her robe enough to know that she'd shaved her down below area. I looked behind her and you could see a video camera set up on a tripod, so it was obvious what they were doing. The guy handed me the money with a good-sized tip, no pun intended, and tells me that he appreciated me bringing their food. I said, "No problem. Have fun doing what you're doing, and if you need a cameraman, let me know." I don't even remember thinking the last part until it was coming out of my mouth. He just kinda laughed and said, "Maybe next time, my dude." The girl just laughed and I left. Damn the bad luck. Honestly, I don't know what I would have done if they said, "Yeah, let's do this." I was in the bathroom. I thought I saw a giant pink marital aid. A closer look revealed that it was soap shaped like a man's junk. Years ago, I used to deliver and set up furniture of all sorts. Not that weird, but I used to find vibrating toys and marital aids under mattresses all the fricking time. I'd stand the mattress up against the wall and they'd be laid out there. I'd simply tell the homeowner, "I've got to grab some tools from the truck. If there's anything you need to clean up, now is the time to do it." I'd come back in and the adult toys would be gone. Every time, and they'd never say a word about it. It wasn't a big deal, I just didn't want to handle them if the homeowner was home. They'd be a little embarrassed. Like no eye contact or red cheeks, but I'd like to think I handled it as professionally as possible, given the fact that I was 17 to 20 years old. Similar, I was tasked with entering every room in a small hotel to verify dimensions for an architectural project. One room, two men who looked like they were from the 80s, clearly doing some sort of business. Computers, printers, filing cabinets. But there was also some serious adult flicks on the TV, like hardcore stuff, and it was just background noise. So weird. When I did pest control, I had a house I serviced where 3 women who took their clothes off for money lived. They had poles all over the place and so much glitter everywhere. But they always hooked me up with some really good coffee that one of them got sent back from home. Aside from that, I found a body once. That probably wins it for stuff I wasn't expecting. Wasn't inside their home, but outside. I was on hurricane relief in the mountains of New York. We had to go and supply water to this guy whose house was deep in the woods. His property was surrounded by trees, and hanging from those trees were a bunch of colored baby dolls from nooses. There was a wooden archway as you approached his house that said "Arbeit macht frei," which means "work sets you free." That slogan was the same one used in the most famous of the infamous and evil camps of the Third Reich. I had to work in a government housing block at Main and Hastings in Vancouver. I was cutting a hole in a ceiling while someone was laying a dirty mattress right beside the ladder, injecting smack. The person was so screwed up that he didn't even notice all of the drywall dust I was spilling on him. Male anatomy. Eggplants everywhere. Sculptures and artworks of sausages, literally about 1,000, like a hoarder-type situation. I was doing their cable, and you really couldn't avoid contact with a trouser monster or two. It was dark in there from the skyscraper-sized stacks of male members blocking out the light. Years ago, I drove a tow truck at night, putting myself through college. Got a call to go and see this woman's car. I pull up, and she's in the car and won't get out. I ask her, "Mom, please get out so I can safely tow your vehicle without you in it." She said, "That's never going to happen." I said, "It's an insurance violation for me to let you ride in your car." It was late, so I said, "Screw it. Mom, please move to the passenger seat so I can put your car in neutral and steer it up onto the flatbed." She complies. I get in the car and she says, "I can't leave them alone in here." And I'm like, "Who?" I turn around and there's, no joke, 30 cats in the back seat of this old station wagon. Every single one of them in some sort of Halloween costume. The car smelled worse than anything I've ever encountered in my entire life. I guess this counts as a home since the crazy cat lady was living in her car. Oh dear. Well, color me surprised that there wasn't just the most wild ongoing feline melee 24/7 in that place. And I know you said you weren't joking, but more than 30? In a car? What on earth? I do property maintenance. One guy has been having problems with his heater recently. The breakers are in the closet on the wall. I've gone in a few times and noticed this huge stack covered by a big blue blanket. The other day I got curious and I took a peek in. It was a huge collection of adult magazines. It wasn't just one stack either. There were 2 stacks. I'm basically 6 foot tall, and these came up to my chin. I've seen all kinds of crappy and nasty apartments, but this one had me chuckling all day. I do property management for multimillionaires, one of whom has a plaque in her house from when she sold her shares in a company in excess of 50 million. It's not as strange as some of the comments here, but it always creeped me out. And her house is extremely nice, right on the beach, but it's a pretty old house. Inside, everything is pretty old, from the furniture to the wallpaper. She has an abundance of creepy pictures dating back to the 1800s on her walls, on her tables, and even her cup holders have creepy-looking people on the bottom, where you'd put your cup. I imagine it's all old pictures of her family, but it's really bizarre. She also has really old dolls that look creepy as hell, some of them resembling Annabelle from the movie. She probably has 3 or 4 of those in every room in her 5,000-plus square foot house. I hate going there.
What do insanely poor people buy that ordinary people know nothing about? Growing up, my family had its moments of struggle. Our public transport system at the time had tickets which were simply hole-punched with the date and month, not the year. So we'd save them and store them neatly in envelopes marked by month and concession or full fare. After a few years of saving tickets, we pretty much had free train and bus travel for the next 10 years, until they changed the ticketing system to electronically stamped tickets with barcodes. My office only has a unisex bathroom, so it has the facilities for men and women. Naturally, there's a tampon machine, and tampons are only 5 cents. Once a month, I'll work late, get a roll of nickels, and fill up a grocery sack with tampons for my wife. Extended stay housing or motels/hotels. When you can't qualify to get an apartment because you don't have proof of income, you end up wasting more money to stay for a week at an extended day housing or a cheap motel. It sucks having no home and being a transient. I promise myself never to be in the same situation again. I was so poor once that I would go to Long John Silver's and order a water and crunchies, which used to be free, then sit there and watch the people that would dine in. It was amazing how little they ate, and then they would leave without dumping their tray off in the trash. Fries, hush puppies, chicken, fish, all untouched. No, I didn't eat a piece that was bitten off of. I once saw a woman order a 2-piece fish and more for her kid that ate 1 hush puppy and a few fries, and then left the rest of it there. It was the best I had eaten in weeks. Glad that's behind me now. Lots of school systems do free lunches for kids under 18 during the summer. When I was a kid, I remember my dad taking us to get lunch at the school, then go play disc golf, soccer, or do something else free and fun. It was a blast, and I had no clue it was because we were poor. Dollar theaters, and sometimes they have a free afternoon or evening show for kids with the purchase of a parent ticket. Many movies were seen by the 3 of us for $4 with a shared popcorn and Coke. My dad was amazing at making us feel rich on basically nothing. When I was a child, Burger King ran a special kids meal where it was 2 mini burgers that were attached to each other like a weird conjoined burger experiment. Sometimes we would go. My dinner was 1.5 of the mini burgers. My mom was the half I didn't eat, and she would fill up on the free refills of soda. I've been both very poor and very comfortable. A lot of very true statements are already posted here, but here's what I haven't noticed. When you're broke, you can't plan ahead or shop sales or buy in bulk. People have to wait to buy something until they absolutely need it, so they have to pay whatever the price is at that moment. If 10 packs of paper towels are on sale for half price, that's great, but you can only afford 1 roll anyway. In this way, poor people actually pay more than others for common staple goods. Stuff on layaway. My mom would always go to this store that sold heavily discounted irregulars and put it on layaway for our new school clothes. This is actually a good question that can illustrate something. When you're poor, the system is set up to keep you that way. For example, how much do you pay to cash your paycheck? If you aren't and have never been poor, you probably said pay because you don't. Your check probably goes via direct deposit right into your checking account. But what if you have bad credit history such that you can't get a checking account? Well, now you have to pay to go to a check cashing service and pay money to get it. This means that out of your already low check, you get a few dollars less. If you're lucky, you can find a grocery store that will give your fee back and certificates to the store. But even then, they might charge you a small fee on top of that. How about this? How much is your car insurance? Did you know that if you get bad credit, it's higher? So now that you're poor, you get to pay more money for your insurance. And you'll find that the only landlord that will rent to you at a place not in the absolute worst part of town will ask you to double your deposit since you've had financial trouble in the past. It gets a lot worse. Your bad credit combined with your shaky job history and barren wasteland of a savings mean your options for transportation are severely limited. If you need a car, you'll have to go to one of those lots. Have you ever driven a car into the ground? I mean, put like 200,000 miles on it and drive it until it just doesn't want to go anymore? Then you take your jalopy into the local reputable Honda dealer and they give you $20 and a Snicker bar for it. What do you think they do with it? They certainly don't sell it at their lot, that's for sure. They aren't going to park your ridiculous hoopty next to their brand new Accords and Civics. Just being in the same vicinity of it drops their value. No, they usually have a deal with or ownership in one of those lots. Those lots are in bad parts of town. The office usually looks like a tool shed. They offer financing at rates that would make a loan shark uneasy. Their cars usually have a lot of miles and are guaranteed only to make it off the lot. Some of them will even rig up the cars with tracking devices so their repo men can find you easier. That lot will sell this hunk of junk to the kind of person who, more than anyone else, needs it to start every day and get them to work. When your car breaks down, what do? Probably take it to the shop to get it fixed. What if you had no money and no credit cards? And what if you were a week into a job in which you were as replaceable as a number 2 pencil? Well, hope you don't have any kids. At least then you might be able to call a friend or family member to help you out. If you have kids, now you have to find someone to help you drive them to your childcare provider, which you can barely afford as it is anyhow, and take you to work. Then pick you and your kids up. If you don't have kids, you can probably at least take a cab today. And then you can fall into another trap. You can get a short-term loan at 300% APR. People who have credit don't get these loans because they're predatory and sketchy. They take advantage of people who have no other options. Ordinary people may know a little bit about them, but usually just say, what kind of stupid person gets themselves into that? Without realizing that it's not a stupid option so much as a last resort for many people in poverty. When you're poor, you pay for everything. Many things that other people don't have to pay for, or just don't have to worry about. This is one of the fatal flaws of the bootstrap mentality in which fixing poverty is simply a matter of will. When you're that far down, the deck is entirely stacked against you. The world is rigged to keep poor people poor. I had to move out on my own when I was 17. I had no money at all and drove an old clunker Camry. I got a flat tire to match the flat spare in the trunk. I went to the discount tire on the east side of Indianapolis, where I was living, to see if they could patch it. When they got it on the rack, they said that the belts were showing around the tire. In fact, all of the tires. And I would have to replace all 4 tires. I thanked them, went outside, sat in my car, and started crying. The manager came out and knocked on the window. He said that he had a set of tires that would fit my wheels that someone had left when they got new tires. I told him, thanks, but I didn't have any money. He told me not to worry about it and when I graduate to come back and buy my tires from them. You can get new car parts from the junkyard for virtually nothing, with added discounts if you remove them from the junkers yourself. I had a 12-year-old car in college, and when it blew a tire, I went to the junkyard and found a decent set of tires. I bought all 4 for $70, which reduced my food budget to $16 for the next 2 weeks. Some lady in the grocery store saw me with a calculator trying to figure out how much ramen I could buy with $16 and handed me a $20. It made me cry. I'm glad I'm not poor anymore, but I'll always remember that lady. The first 4 years of my life were spent in abject poverty. As a child, I would ask my mom if we could get a candy bar. She would explain to me at age 3 that we could get the candy bar, but if we did, it meant we couldn't afford a 2-liter of Coca-Cola. She would phrase it like so: if you get the candy bar, it'll be gone in a few days. But if you get the Coca-Cola, we can have Coca-Cola for a whole week. Amazingly, I knew enough to understand that Coca-Cola for over a week was a better deal than 2 days of a candy bar. As a side effect, I was regularly told no when I asked for things I wanted, mostly Lego sets or He-Man toys. Around age 6, my father's stake in a mineral prospecting company finally paid off. Turns out he had been putting every dime he had into it since before I was born. We went from surviving on mayonnaise sandwiches to having 2015's equivalent of $10,300 per month in income. My little sister was around 2 or so at this time, and she was getting everything she wanted. For the first 6 years of my life, I had learned that asking for things I wanted would always end with no, so I never asked for anything. My parents weren't able to put it together until my grandmother got very sick and came to live with us. The whole family went out shopping, and my grandmother knew I loved Legos, but I didn't ask for a set of them. Meanwhile, my little sister had a Barbie doll and a My Little Pony in each hand. She stopped and asked me, "Poster, don't you want a Lego set?" Mommy and Daddy always tell me, "No, Grandma, we can't afford them." I only have a vague memory of this, but before she died, my grandmother told me this story and said that my mom broke down in tears in the middle of the store, sobbing. My dad had a look of defeated failure on his face, according to her. Apparently, it simply never occurred to them the reason I never asked for anything was because I had always been told no. For Christmas, I got 3 Lego Technic sets. It's not the things we bought. I grew up in a level of poverty in the entire 1980s and some of the 1990s that modern politicians will swear to you doesn't occur in modern America. After all, we have food stamps and welfare, and anyone still poor after that is obviously just a lazy addict bum. It's not the things we bought. We lived on powdered milk and rice and ramen, and before that, old wonton soup packets that I just realized don't exist anymore, and government cheese, and bread from the discount rack at the local bakery, about 9 minutes away from growing mold. But hey, at least it was only 19 cents a loaf. It's the things we scavenged. Hauling food out of the dumpster at 7-Eleven because they threw away piles of chip bags that were a day over their expiration. The manager caught us one day and they apparently told the employees to stab a hole in each chip bag after that. Eventually, we just had to sniff each bag to make sure nothing was contaminated. We would check neighbors' trash bins as well, rescuing half a pizza some idiots had ordered the night before then threw away after a handful of slices. We would haul in furniture from alleyways. My youngest sibling, my sister, received a twin bed mattress that had a grotesque brown stain on it. It looked like someone had pooped a gallon of wet feces onto it. We didn't care though. We scrubbed that down with bleach over and over and she slept on it for years. And then there were times when the welfare checks or food stamps didn't arrive, and the trash bins were not producing food. I grew up in a fairly rural area, and what did we do when that happened? Well, I know that in the winter, gray squirrel tastes pretty gross. Sure, people from the south can claim that their brown and red squirrels are delicious, but I would rather eat poop out of a pig's butt than eat another bite of squirrel meat, or jackrabbit, or dandelion greens. I guess I'm just saying that it's not what insanely poor people buy since they're insanely poor. They can't afford to buy anything. You can keep the electricity and rent paid, or you can, nope, there's not another choice. Food, medicine, clothing, furnishings, blankets, all of this is stuff you can pull out of the garbage. Powdered milk. I once worked in a call center, and an old lady called almost in tears that cable went up by $1.50. Her line that she repeated more than once was that she couldn't afford fresh milk and had to buy powdered milk. Unless it's due to a lack of refrigeration available or some sort of allergy, only the very poor would buy powdered over fresh milk. I knew a guy who, when he would get sick, would go to a livestock feed store and buy antibiotics and other meds that were meant for farm animals. There was another med he'd get at pet stores too. He would just cut the pills into smaller pieces and try to guess what the proper milligram amount was. It's apparently crazy cheap for certain meds, and doesn't require a prescription or government oversight like it would at a normal pharmacy. I had a really odd childhood. Until age 9, my family would have been classed as upper middle class. Then my father left and my mom just went crazy. From 9 to 18, we were dirt poor. I remember being 10 years old and our weekly treat was to go to the Little Woods Cafe, and they did a 99p 5-piece breakfast. We shared that among my mum, brother, sister, and me. One of us got the extra item. We'd take turns. As an adult, I've made sure my children will never know poverty because of excellent memories like that. Nothing motivates you more than memories of fighting over a solitary sausage. A buddy of mine went through a tough time a few years back, and I didn't know about it until he told me about a year ago. One thing that stuck with me was that he just made enough money to survive. By survive, I meant literally enough money to pay rent, utilities, and the cheapest, worst food he could buy. He couldn't afford transportation, not even the bus. He told me about a span of a few months he went through where he literally only ate water, dry noodles, and peanut butter for a few months. He worked at a restaurant and they'd cut his hours. He couldn't find other work. His first big reality check was that he had to sell his car to make rent one month. The next month, he started selling other unnecessary items, like his old TV, some other appliances, and his nicer clothes. So he got to the point where he was literally doing his laundry with dish soap in his sink. He couldn't afford deodorant, razors, or any of the things that we take for granted, so he'd steal them from the grocery store. He didn't like to do it, but he had no choice. He never got caught. When he told me all of this, I was floored. I wish he would have told me when it was happening. I would have helped any way I could. At that time, I was by no means living a fancy lifestyle, but I could have thrown him a 20 here and there to help him put some groceries in the house or some TP in the bathroom. In university, I used to buy 10 to 20 pound bags of potatoes, freeze-dried chives, and gravy mix in bulk. Not the supermarket packs which are $1 for 2 cups of gravy. Restaurant-sized packs that make 8 liters. That was often dinner, usually at the end of the month when money got tight. Sometimes I had even saved enough that I could have mashed potatoes with some sort of dairy or bacon grease. I also had a cheap tub of protein powder for weightlifters, and it was gross. But I would blend it up, usually with water, and hold my nose and gulp it down. It was actual protein, and slightly more healthy than a week-long diet of potatoes. Learning the times of the day when meat, bakery, fish, vegetable, and miscellaneous items are reduced to 75% off at the local supermarket. I've been learning this for years, but it's a good day when you find 400 grams of fresh mince for 99 pence, and you have a warm, filling food that you used to take for granted when living with parents. One thing I've noticed about being poor is that you become almost vegetarian, because meat just costs too much, fresh or frozen. Another thing would be buying the cheapest large container of yogurt and mixing it in jam for fruity yogurt. But that's not about being poor, that's just a good idea. At-home surgery. Used a pair of needle nose pliers, a razor blade, and some antiseptic superglue to remove a cyst on my forehead. The secret is to cut in a cat's eye shape, quickly push the skin back after you pull the cyst out, don't let it pop, and get the glue on fast. It hurts a lot, but it bleeds a lot and you have to get it on quick to stop the bleeding. Bags of frozen veggies and a couple packets of ramen can make a family meal. I used to buy these awful frozen chicken discs wrapped in bacon. They were terrible, filled with gristle and just nasty. Eating those with rice and frozen corn was a real treat. I ate mac and cheese every day for about 2 to 3 years because that was all I could cook while my mom worked. I could have made SpaghettiOs, but I hated those. That for dinner, and one of those cheap 99-cent packed donuts from the grocery store for breakfast. Lunch was a bologna sandwich and an apple. Finally, when I was about 10 or 11, I started teaching myself how to cook from my mom's old cookbook, so my meals got a lot better. All carbs and cheap fats, scalloped potatoes, rice, and cheap meats. My local bus service used to have paper transfers, so you'd pay your fare, get the paper transfer that was good for an hour, and then you'd use it for the next bus. But if you were only going to the station, you'd get a paper transfer anyway, then hang around the station for an extra 5 minutes to see if anyone needed it. Conversely, you'd wait around for people getting off the bus to see if you could score someone's transfer. This only worked if you weren't switching buses. But I got quite a few free rides this way, and gave many transfers away. Also, going without meds, living in constant pain because you can't afford a prescription. I remember laying in my bed at night, and my mom would be sobbing in her bed from pain because she couldn't afford the meds that would treat her rheumatoid arthritis or anything but generic Tylenol for her pain. I guess that's not really buying anything, but while we're on memory lane, there was also saving your birthday money from your grandma and aunts and uncles, so you could pay for a babysitting course that lets you babysit at 12. Got a babysitting job at 12 and babysat every day from 3 until 7 or 8 to earn some money. I'd give that money to my dad so he can pay his phone bill and put gas in the car. I got a real job at 14, working at a fast food restaurant so I could eat dirt cheap. Still gave my dad money, but this time knowing it was going to the casino or the bar, but still doing it anyway. Having worked in a dollar store, I saw some people come through who had to be pretty thrifty. First was dollar store steaks. Seriously, steaks for $1. If that doesn't sound sketchy, I don't know what does. Second, this was also a Hispanic thing I noticed. Fabuloso. That stuff cleans everything. I had no clue what it was till I grabbed a busted bottle to clean the bathroom one day. Third, you also get really used to pasta and rice. They're cheap and can be bought in bunches. And lastly, everyone bought 2 sandwiches from Subway because a third is free. Coupons like this go a long way. One last thing I noticed, and this is pretty bad, the dollar store's toilet paper is seriously better than the toilet paper my mom buys. Sacrificing my plate of food to feed my little brother and 3 little sisters whilst my mom gave up her food as well. I was 10 when this was happening, all while my obese, abusive stepdad ate steak and Brussels sprouts, lest my mom got beat. Luckily, he's gone now. Mom's somewhat stable and I'm 17. I'm saving up money right now, but that's one thing I fear being. I don't want to be hungry or unable to provide. I just remember telling my mom that I'm hungry, and her breaking down and crying. Luckily, I had a best friend that I used to go to and bring leftovers from across the street back over. About a year ago, I was addicted to alcohol, 4,000 kilometers from home, dropped out of school, and living in my 20-year-old car. I got so used to eating microwave potatoes that I considered walking into a 7-Eleven and pocketing a handful of mayo packets while pretending to buy a hot dog. A special treat. I grew up distinctly middle class and generally didn't want for much. My recent experience has really put into perspective the difficulties experienced by people who are or have been in similar situations to myself, but bear the burden of direct responsibility to kids and family. Things have gotten a lot better since I've accepted the help of other people. Seriously, even relatively tiny gestures of kindness will go a long way with someone who's literally struggling for survival. Never underestimate the impact you can have upon another person's life. I'd probably be dead by now if it weren't for the unconditional love and support of friends, family, and random strangers. Instead, I'm 25, relatively healthy again, and back in school trying to finish off my engineering degree. It's not really about what you buy, it's about what you can make or substitute. Can't afford to run to the gas to run the stove and want that French toast? Toast the bread on the barbecue, grill melt some butter, and sprinkle cinnamon sugar on it. Can't afford real spaghetti? Mix some tomato soup and butter. Heat till warm, pour over some ramen, and you have yourself some poor man's spaghetti. You'd also be surprised what you can get for almost free at garage sales or online. Teachers of Reddit, they say there are no stupid questions, but what's the most stupid question a student has ever asked you? Not a question, but more a statement that prompted a whole discussion when I was student teaching. To set the stage, I'd like to point out that I'm white and my leading teacher was African American, and the classroom was about 60% African American, 30% Latino, and the remaining 10% a mixture of Asian and white. This was also my advanced class, and we were discussing the apartheid in Africa. Me. So the black Africans and white Africans, and I immediately get interrupted. A student raises their hand. Miss Ducky, you can't say that. Me. Say what? Student. Black. It's African American. Me, trying my hardest not to die a little inside. No, that is actually not the correct phrase. Can anyone tell me why African American is not the correct term for this situation? I'm met with silence. Me. Okay guys, look at it this way. Are we talking about Americans? No, we're not. We're talking about a racial issue in Africa with no relation to America at all. The definition of African American is a person of African descent living in America. So if the people we're talking about are not American, they can't be African American, can they? So to talk about the racial issue, the labels are used as black Africans and white Africans, as outlined by our textbook. Student. No, you can't say that. They're African American. At this point, my lead teacher is facepalming. She's in total disbelief, and as much as she loved to watch me struggle, she stepped in and tried to explain it as well. 20 minutes go by of the two of us really trying our best. The bell ends up ringing, the kids still couldn't figure out, and I think we both nearly cried. Grade 5 Sex Ed. I had a rule that any question can be asked, but I might ask you to ask your parents instead of me. I heard a story about a man who put his stuff into muffins and then fed it to grade 1 kids. Well, that's pretty disgusting, and I would think that person would go to jail for doing that. Wouldn't the girls get pregnant from eating it? And before I could say anything, another student blurted out, "No, they wouldn't get pregnant. They haven't gone through puberty yet." I'm thankful for days when kids remind me that they're still kids. I actually had a student ask me, what are those pyramid-shaped things in Egypt called? I've never seen a class laugh that hard before. I once projected a picture of the Earth onto the front whiteboard. A student asked, how do astronauts stand on a planet like that? This was an 8th grade student being totally serious. 9th grade ELA, a few chapters into Of Mice and Men. What kind of work does George do on the farm? I'm not sure. Probably the same work that everyone else is doing. Oh, it must be hard for him to help out since he's a mouse. At the college midterm, I had a guy come up to me that I've never seen in class. He proceeded to ask me what his grade is. I checked the sheet and he never turned in a single piece of homework, no quizzes, and never attended a test. What did you think you'd have? You got a solid F. After a lengthy explanation of the effects of volcanic eruptions on human communities, I had a grade 6 student ask me why on earth people even make volcanic eruptions. While I was student teaching, I had a student ask where Texas was on the map I was projecting on the screen. The map was of China. I'm a private writing instructor. A couple of years ago, I had a student ask me if commas were real or imaginary. He was equally dubious about semicolons, which he referred to as imitation periods. He was 26 and very serious. In 7th grade science during sex ed, they were talking about oral sex. A Mormon girl in class said, "Wait, you can get an STD just from talking about sex?" I wouldn't call the question stupid, just no exposure at all to the topic beforehand. I was asked by a crying student once if there was a second moon. We were outside for recess, and as happens sometimes, the moon was visible. I said no. Why? And she pointed to the moon and asked, "But aren't the sun and moon the same thing?" 4th grade student, not special needs or anything. She was crying because the other kids were making fun of her for thinking the sun and the moon were the same thing. After I explained to her that the sun did not turn into the moon at night and then back into the sun in the morning, I did an impromptu science lesson that afternoon with the whole class. This came up all the time when I was teaching kids how to do their taxes. I must have had this conversation a dozen times. "Sir, I don't know what to do with this part." What does the instruction say on the line? "Add box 23 and 24 and write the answer here." So add box 23 and 24. I, to this day, have no idea how you teach someone to follow very explicit instructions. As part of teaching US government, I ran a zombie apocalypse scenario where the students had to respond to an ongoing crisis in real time, using the actual powers of the government as different parts of the government. It was my favorite activity all semester, and I went all in, including a large map of the US that would be updated every day that passed. As part of this activity, I prepared a handout of a fake news story about the zombie apocalypse beginning in our hometown. It had pictures of zombies shambling around and was written all newspaper style. One day after handing these out, an 18-year-old student raised their hand and said, "Mr. Poster, did this really happen?" I had a pupil ask me if the sun they saw in America was the same as the sun we saw here in Scotland, and why was their sun so much warmer? In health class, while going over reproduction, there was a student who raised her hand and asked if you were sterile, could you pass it on to your children? The whole class giggled, and she, confused, said she was serious. She wanted to know if you're sterile, could you pass it on to your kids? I said to her, "Okay, let's think about this. What does it mean to be sterile?" She started answering, "It means you can't have Oh. Followed by another round of laughter from the rest of the class. For sex ed class, we had a box where students could submit questions anonymously. One day, one of the questions asked, "My dad's bits are circumcised, but not mine. Does this mean he isn't my dad?" Yeah, they believed circumcision was hereditary. I used to do volunteer teaching at an after-school program for 14-year-olds. We were doing a project that involved balloons. One boy had blown his balloon but couldn't get it tied. I tied it and gave it back to him. He immediately tossed it up. As it sank to the floor, his face fell. Obviously disappointed, he asked, "Aw, so they're not helium?" Warm spring day, no AC. Fan blowing in the front of the room. Hand goes up. "Can you make the fan ovulate?" No, I cannot. My wife is a teacher, but this is my favorite story of hers. They were discussing how Native Americans relied on hunting buffalo and used all parts of it for food, clothing, shelter, etc. In reference to how they used the buffalo for shelter, one student asked, "So do they stack the buffalo on top of each other?" This one kid in my 10th grade biology class takes the cake for me. We were going over chromosomes, talking about the effects of an extra chromosome, Down syndrome, and this kid looks confused as hell, gears turning like mad in his head. Finally, he raises his hand. With the extra chromosome, shouldn't they be like superheroes? Most of the idiotic questions I get are linked to history, even though I'm an English teacher. They have no idea about different time periods or a sense of centuries. So I would get questions like, why didn't Dickens just get on a plane? Was the internet not around then? Then being the 1700s. Were the Victorians around when dinosaurs were? And these are 14 to 16-year-olds. It gets even harder for them when thinking about the few decades prior to their existence, i.e. the 50s through 90s. I wonder if we're all like that a little when we're so young. I was a teacher's assistant for a geography class. I had been the teacher's assistant for this class for 3 semesters, and the professor had decided to retire. New professor comes in and tries to make this class as not boring that it could possibly be. In her defense, she did teach the class with enthusiasm. Anyway, the second project for the class was a short presentation about different resources of the world, renewable energy, non-renewable, etc. I tell 90+ students and email every single one of them to email me their presentation when they're done, and I'll put them on a list for the order of presentations. I get a good 60 to 75 presentations. The week of presentations, I sent out an email with the list and get a good 10 or so emails back asking why they weren't on the list. I calmly explain to them the aforementioned instructions and send out a new list. On the first day, 5 more students ask me the same question. A bit irritated, I explain to them as well and announce it to the class once more. The list gets very long, and the students' lack of preparation continues. Presentations get extended to 2 or more weeks, and in those 2 weeks, the stragglers email me. At this point, I've lost my hope in humanity, and I just get more and more irritated. I had done everything to ensure that every one of those students knew what to do for presentations, even if they were out sick. They still had an email that they needed to check in case an announcement was made. It stuck with me for the rest of the semester, and I found out from my professor that some students complained about me as being the worst and rudest TA they ever had. This one is one of my favorites. I had one of my choir students sitting there studying her hands for about 10 minutes. She wasn't really singing, just quizzically looking at both sides of her hands. So I finally asked what was so interesting about her hands. Her response? Well, I was wondering, are gloves like underwear for your hands? No, they're not. Later that year, she was also surprised to learn that helicopters were started inside the cabin of the helicopter and not by a gigantic ripcord pulled by a bunch of people. Let me give you a bit of context first. I teach social science in Sweden, ages 16 to 18, and this particular question came from an 18-year-old. We had been working on a theme about crime, punishment, and legislation, and we had devoted a couple of hours on the issue of file sharing, whether it should be legal or illegal, the morality of it, etc. So, on the test, I included a question about file sharing, both because I knew we had covered it in class and because I knew that every single one of them was guilty of file sharing. As I always do when handing out a text or quiz, I ask my students to read all questions before starting to answer them. As they started reading the questions, one of them looks up at me and asks, "Mr. Poster, what is file sharing?" There was a moment of complete and utter silence in the classroom, and then his classmates opened up on him. And my God, they were savage. The thing is, he just experienced a temporary brain freeze. Test nerves, probably. And I could see in his eyes right after he asked the question that it dawned on him. To his credit, he took it like a champ. Just sat there and nodded as he got roasted so bad that not even the best burn ward would have taken him in as salvageable. 10th grade honors chemistry. Topic is states of matter. What would liquid ice be called? We're still not sure if he was making a joke about the short-lived icebreaker mints, liquid ice, because everyone was laughing too hard. Elementary student after leaving their backpack on the bus. Someone should invent some sort of device that attaches a backpack to a person's body so they don't lose it. I'm a casual lecturer and have a young family, so only work the hours I'm paid. Quite often, I'll get a student not show for the entire semester, then in the last week appear and ask why I can't teach them out of hours. There have been tears and complaints when I basically said that if they'd shown up to class, they'd know what they were doing, and I have better things to do with my life than support lazy students. If you drink too much Gatorade and fill up to here, points at throat, do you drown? You know there's stuff in your body and you're not just a hollow tank, right? Here's my personal favorite. We were watching documentaries in black and white. I think about the Great Depression. A kid raises his hand and I call on him. He says, "Never mind, it's a stupid question." I say, "There are no stupid questions. Go ahead." He proceeds with, "Did they have color back then? Like in real life?" I was dumbfounded and could not keep a straight face. Turns out there are stupid questions. Whenever I have a professor that tells us to ask anything because there are no stupid questions, I immediately raise my hand and ask, why do meteorites always land in craters? My cousin is a teacher, and one day he had to teach a sex ed unit to the class. You know, the ones where everyone splits off into boy and girl groups so that they can put any question in a hat and have it answered anonymously. He's a guy, so he was answering the questions for the boys. So he got some questions that were clearly looking for stupid answers and threw them out. As usual, certain jokers were trying to get a rise out of him. Then he got a question that asked, why do you have to have an erection to have sex with a girl? This one he couldn't avoid. He didn't know if it was serious or not, so he decided he would have to answer it. He said, you know how you have the plastic tip on the end of your shoelaces to get it in the hole? It's kind of like that. This may be the greatest metaphor I ever personally heard of. We're getting ready for a field trip in a class of about 20. I make the announcement, we're leaving in about 10 minutes, go to the bathroom and fill up your water bottles. Everyone's getting ready and standing around, and one of my students comes to me in a panic. Excuse me, have we left yet? We all look around at everyone standing by the door or by their desks. No, I don't think we've left yet. Good grief. I was only student teaching at the time. It was a high school biology class on human reproduction unit. We're talking about sperm. My mentor teacher asks, so what is the purpose of glucose in human sperm? A student replied in a genuine manner, so that it tastes sweet? Not really a question, but an answer to a question. I was teaching a world history course to 10th graders and asked the question, what does AD mean? A couple kids took a shot but were wrong, and a girl who fit the absolute textbook description of a stereotypical cheerleader raised her hand and answered as confidently as someone would answer that the sky is blue or grass is green with, after dinosaurs. I'm a teacher in an urban district with a high immigrant population. I've been asked why people don't fall off the bottom of the earth, if anyone lives on Mars, if Jewish people really are aliens, etc. Neither the questions nor the students were truly stupid. Many students had simply been raised in areas with little or no formal education, or by parents who themselves were incredibly negligent, superstitious, and/or uninformed. I teach history and religion. As I was driving with one of my students, I passed a church that I briefly attended my freshman year of college. Pointing it out, I mentioned that they were a fundamentalist Protestant church, and I asked her if she knew the history of that church. And I kid you not, her literal and immediate response was, yeah, aren't they the ones who followed Martin Luther King Jr. when he broke off from the Anglican church but kept everything almost exactly the same? Yeah, she somehow blended 3 separate religious reformations from 3 very different periods of time, confused which churches were a part of those reformations, and somehow threw the American Civil Rights Movement in there. It was pretty bad. We were discussing the plight of African Americans during Reconstruction. If black people had such a bad time in America, why did they immigrate here? I immediately saw the black kid behind her sit up and silently mouth, "What the F?" Sadly, this was in a high school honors course. I will say in the girl's defense, she immediately knew how idiotic that question was and turned bright red. Cringeworthy moment for all. I'm a teacher, and there really are no stupid questions from students. And if you read the responses, you'll see that they're mostly just questions from genuinely curious kids who have big gaps in their knowledge or understanding, which is not their fault, but the fault of previous teachers, their parents, or something they've read or heard about only in passing and misunderstood. The only questions that frustrate me are the ones that are willfully ignorant or are asked as a joke and derail good discussions, or by a student that ignored my long and detailed instructions asking me the exact question I just spent minutes answering. But when you're dealing with 12 to 14-year-olds, it comes with the territory, and it's all entirely forgivable. And I'm a teacher to help them learn how to be thoughtful humans. My parents used to teach identical 6th grade science curriculum at 2 different schools and grade papers at home together. They would read the dumbest answers aloud, one-upping each other until they had a winner. The only answer I remember clearly was to the question, what is the smallest thing in the universe? One kid answered, about the size of 2 potatoes. I teach second grade in Massachusetts, but I'm originally from Texas, so I had someone from home be pen pals with my class. My kids were writing letters to their pen pals. They're supposed to tell them something about themselves and then ask them some questions. Miss Poster, do they speak English in Texas? Do I speak English? Yes. Am I from Texas? Yes. So what do you think the answer to your question might be? Maybe? So we spent the day talking about the Japanese attack and America's entrance into World War II. Student number 1. Wait, is Pearl Harbor still alive? Raucous laughter until student number 2. Of course she's dead. I was teaching a history class that was learning about the invasion of the Huns and the fall of Rome. During silent reading, a student raised their hand and called me over. He asked me, were these like half horse people? I was really confused and asked why he thought that. It says here they were skilled horsemen. I told him that just meant they were good at riding horses, not that they were centaurs. I teach 4th grade, and a student did some great work, and I made an offhanded comment about how I love my job. Another student asked, what's your job? I teach preschool, so I could go on and on about dumb things. But my favorite is this story. During group time one day, I couldn't help but notice one of my kids had a very strong poop odor. I pulled him aside and asked if he had had an accident. He proudly said no, and that he made it just in time. I suggested he go wipe again and double check. About 5 minutes later, he comes to me with his hands covered in poop. He said I didn't tell him what to wipe with, so he just used his hands. I was holding study hall for 11th and 12th graders. From the back of the room, a few students began arguing back and forth. When I asked what was going on, one of the girls looked me straight in the eye and asked, is it true that you can still get pregnant from anal sex? I ultimately was forced to get an anatomy book and hold a mini health class. I had a kid in 7th grade ask me how people decide which day is their birthday. When I explained to him that your birthday is the day you were born and you don't get to choose it, he couldn't believe it and acted as if I told him he just won a million candy bars. I think the dumbest question I've heard went along the lines of, isn't it a fact that conservatives just want to conserve money and liberals just want to liberate people in need? This kid's a senior in college and has been a part of 2 major elections. Like, come on, man, how do you not know the difference? Chemistry teacher here. I'm regularly asked, can I drink this, miss? When students work with chemicals. The solution is bright blue with a hazard label on it. What do you think? Those who have walked out on first dates, what was your I'm outta here moment? Legitimately, when she said she needed to take a wee as we walked down a back alley next to the bar. She pulled her jeans down, took a poop behind a bin, then searched in the bin and wiped with a sheet of newspaper. I was totally infatuated with her after working with her for a few months, and in 30 seconds, it completely disappeared. Fast. Went to meet a guy for the first time at his house. There was a pile of toenail clippings on his coffee table, and it wasn't one recent clipping. It was like many clippings. I quickly left. She had 22 cats and would just randomly take in strays, not give them any vet care, and was planning on keeping a recent litter. I love cats. I paid the bartender when she went to the bathroom and hyper walked to the door. I forwarded her contact info and a summary of what she told me to the Humane Society. This guy and I were eating dinner after chatting for a couple of weeks, and unprompted, in the middle of something I was saying, and completely unrelated to what was being discussed, he said something along the lines of, so you know in order for this to work you're gonna have to share yourself, right? My friends and I like to pass girls around. I was pretty dumbfounded, and after a bit of stuttering, I told him I didn't think it was gonna work. I asked for a to-go box and my portion of the check and noped out of there. I had a first date with a girl who insisted we go to a really expensive place, where she ordered a $25 appetizer, $45 steak, and a $15 drink. She also wouldn't put her phone down, kept taking calls and answering texts. The waitress noticed and motioned for me from behind her. I excused myself, and the waitress had made separate bills and asked if I wanted to pay my share and leave hers at the table. I said that would be wonderful, so I did. He invited me and a friend to play dodgeball with a group of folks I've never met. We're having an okay time, but he's paying more attention to his friends. But that's fine because I've got my friend to keep me occupied. We're hanging out in the parking lot before the first game is about to start when out of nowhere he grabs a ball and throws it at my crotch as hard as he can. This dude screams, "Wham bam, right in the clam." I immediately turn to my friend and ask her if she's ready to leave. I say goodbye to him and his friends, immediately come home to a gripe of texts about how immature I was behaving. I was on a first date with a military guy. He spent a large portion of the date talking about why the strippers in Toronto were better than the strippers where we lived. To change the topic, I asked him if he did any volunteer work with military overseas. And he said, "No, I joined the military to kill people, not help people." I got my bill, chugged my beer, and left as fast as I could. The fact that within 10 minutes of meeting him, he started making sexual comments and joking about following me home so he could stalk me if I rejected him. I got out with the help of a bartender who let me leave out the back door. Not me, but this happened to a friend. For context, this friend has a beard. So my friend picks up this girl and they're on their way to dinner. And she says, "You do realize that if this is gonna work, you have to shave that off, right?" He didn't say anything, just turned around and dropped her back off at her house. This is meeting someone from an online dating app. He turns up with pupils the size of dinner plates and super erratic. He said he'd forgotten his wallet, so I got the first round. We were on our way to the second pub to meet his friends so they could lend him some money. For the walk there, he spoke absolute garbage and nonsense nonstop, but ended with how he tried to drown his ex's chihuahuas in a pool. Near the pub, he said he had to answer whoever was calling him on the phone. At this point, we were 30 minutes into the date and already going to the next pub. He downed his drink in about 3 seconds. Whilst he stood there on the phone, I said I'd meet him at the pub. Everything was in close proximity. But instead, I walked past it and ran all the way home. 1 p.m. lunch date and she was drunk as a skunk. She invited me back to her place where she said her 2-year-old son wouldn't even notice. I noped out and called her a cab home. I still feel bad for the son years later. She finally let it slip that she had a boyfriend, but it was totally fine because things have been going bad for a long time and I'm gonna break up with him anyway. My thoughts were that if she would do that to him, she'd do it to me. No thanks. We had great chats online and decided to meet in person. He's got a Bluetooth headset on with a little LED light that shows it's on. He keeps it on during drinks. I work up the nerve to ask if he can take off the headset while we're eating dinner. With pride and complete confidence, he says, "Don't worry, you'll have my full attention. This isn't a phone headset, it's a camera." Invited me to a bar which was apparently close to his apartment and kept wanting to snuggle at his apartment with me. I left to a friend's party and met the man I'd been with for 3+ years. The first guy later texted me explicit photos on Easter Sunday. She brought her pet rat with her that was hanging out in her bra and kept feeding it French fries. She casually mentioned she had warrants, so I just faked an emergency and bailed. He started making inappropriate comments, then took me to his house to use the bathroom before the next part of our date. We had lunch first, then we were supposed to play mini golf. I didn't know he lived with his parents, so I had to meet them on the first date. They were nice, but I felt so uncomfortable because I already knew this wasn't going to move beyond date number 1 thanks to his remarks. He told me to wait in his room while he went to the bathroom, and I noticed that his computer was on. Before our date, he was chatting with a friend and left it up on the screen. The last message he'd sent said, "I hope I get to see her boobs. I bet they're so perky and small." What? Why leave that up and send me in there to see it? I lied, saying that my mom called with an emergency and needed me back home. Noped out of there and never spoke to him again. I had to pick him up and he complained about everything. My car, the way I drove, my music taste, why was I being so quiet whilst carefully plotting my escape plan? But it was definitely the moment he said, "My friends really want to meet you. I need them to know you're real." And that's when I bounced. He was 45 minutes late picking me up. Weather was quite poor, so I gave him a pass. We get to the coffee shop, I take off my jacket, and immediately he says, "Oh, I see you brought your A game. Or should I say D game?" Referring to my breasts. I'm surprisingly busty for my frame. Even the people 2 tables over just stopped and looked at him. I had invited a guy off a dating site to my house. When I opened the door, he said he could kill me if he wanted and to never meet anyone off the internet again. My 2 male roommates were in the kitchen because they knew this guy was coming and heard him. They ran him out of the house pretty damn quick. We started by chatting online. At the time, I was a smoker and told him. He said no big deal because he smokes too. We decided to meet up at Starbucks for coffee. First thing he said, "Hi, by the way, when I said I smoke, I was talking about meth." I said, "Oh, bye," and turned around and left. The guy wanted to meet at a place where I used to work at. I showed up and he was already there. I ordered vodka and we're glaring into the menu while his shots arrive and he's just pounding them back. The base bartender is giving the stink eye. I know him, so I'm like, WTF. The date steps out for the bathroom or to vape or something, and the bartender beelines to my table to warn me that this guy is a raging alcoholic that messed around with his cousin a few months back. I noped right out of there. I had a first date with a girl who told me, "Actually, I'm engaged, but I'm not 100% sure if he's the right one. So I'm just gonna go on a few dates to see if I change my mind." Check please. He invited me inside while he finished getting ready. No biggie. Once inside, he insisted that I let him show me his dungeon. Dude's apartment was pretty empty, minus a TV and couch. But his bedroom was kitted out. He then wanted the now uncomfortable me to see if the shackles on his bed fit me. Thankfully, I had set up for a friend to call me within the first 30 minutes of the date, and I faked an emergency. We were having the usual get-to-know-you conversation over drinks. I was telling her about how my car was stolen the night before, and her response was, "Don't you just hate blacks?" I never said who stole it. I was out of there. I hadn't even met the guy yet. We were still chatting online to set up the first date. We were going to be busy at different times that weekend, but I was interested and sincerely offered to meet a week later instead. He proceeded to get drunk by himself and sent a ton of sad messages about how he couldn't get a date and he was unattractive and I was totally gonna bail on him. Which wasn't the plan before, but it certainly was now. I have a few. Number 1, he told me I wasn't pretty enough to be so confident. Like, what? I was shocked, but the server came to my rescue and was like, "Girl, get out of here. No charge for your drink." Number 2, he told me that people looking at his sleeve tat without permission was the equivalent of women being assaulted for wearing skirts. What? Number 3, I sat down across from him and within 5 minutes of meeting me, he tried to slide his hand up my dress under the table. Yikes. Number 4, he told me he had too many back issues of The Economist to read, so he couldn't read anything I might suggest ever. And number 5, he told me his fiancée of 9 years had dumped him the week before. We were back at her place. She pulled out a giant glass jar that was full of what I thought was moonshine. She proceeded to explain to me that it was 100% GHB and that her kink is to be drugged with it before sex. She went into the bathroom and I got the hell out of there so fast that my imprint on the couch probably wasn't gone by the time I was driving. He was a friend of a friend. We went to a restaurant and ordered our food. While we waited, he started to say things like, "I'll eat this meal first, then I'll eat you out." I laughed because I thought he's just joking. I thought he's just nervous and his mouth lost his filter. Then when the waitress later asked if we want more to drink, he was like, "Yes, bring us something strong." I said, "Not for me, and that I have to drive later and just want a Coke." And he looked at me and was like, "Don't be stupid. You think we'll just do it once and I'll let you leave? You'll at least stay the night." The waitress looked at me with wide eyes like I'm crazy for even being there. After she left, I told him that he has to stop with this, that it was rude and that we're on our first date. He apologized and for 10 minutes it was okay. Then, as if a switch was turned on, he said just like that, mid-sentence, without even ending his previous story, "You know what, I can't control myself anymore. Either we go now or I'll screw you on this table." I told him I have to go to the bathroom. He complained like a baby that we have to go now. I went away anyway and went to the waitress, paid for the food, and left without a word. She wouldn't stop making fun of me. She was 26 and I was 36, though if it matters, we were at the same place in our careers and income. She kept making jokes about my age, about how old and decrepit I was. Eventually, after telling her pretty directly to lay off, I just said, you know, I'm not enjoying this. I'm gonna go, and paid for the table and left. Later, she said it was because she was overcompensating because she was self-conscious about how much younger she was. But that just means that when she's uncomfortable, she goes straight to demeaning the other person. It only happened once. She kept talking about her ex. I asked if she wanted to get back with him. She said, I don't know, and showed me a picture of him. I couldn't leave fast enough. I drove us. I started to parallel park. I had been working in parking in San Francisco for years by then, and he said, I'll park this for you. Women don't do well at parallel parking. At dinner, he was dismissive only to female waitstaff. I ran into these two hilariously drunk surfer dudes on my way from the bathroom, and they told me my date was a jerk. We laughed about it, and I went back to my table. When leaving, the drunk dudes were also outside. I said bye to them, and Jerkface had the nerve to bark, she's with me. I told him to wait while I got in the car and unlocked the doors. Except I didn't. I drove off and left him standing there. The two drunk dudes whooped and yelled, go lady, go! Such an awesome finish to a terribly embarrassing date. It seemed to be going all right for a while. We meet late afternoon and went for a stroll around town, doing a bit of a pub crawl with a drink at each, followed by some food at a monthly food truck festival I knew about, which was going to be followed by a local bar and dancing. I kept seeing the same guy at all the locations, obviously following us. On a toilet break, I mentioned something to one of the pub doormen, who asked him to leave politely, although that got a little heated. She ran over to the doorman and explained that it was her husband. They had a thing of watching each other go out with someone and maybe watching them have sex. I did drop in a question if they had ever done more, like stealing from someone, and she accidentally said that it happened, but only a couple of times, before trying to say that she didn't mean it. I left them with the doormen and reported them to the police. I go to a bar and meet this cute girl, and we get along pretty fine. She invites me back to her place, but it turns out that she was with her friends at the bar and they were just giving her some space for us to talk. They were all drunk, and her friend was insisting on driving home, so her friend, agreed to let me drive them home, because the friend was very set on not leaving her truck parked outside a bar overnight. We get all the way to their apartment complex, and then getting into the parking spot was tricky. So the drunk friend/truck owner insisted on parking, and pulled the I legally own this vehicle card. I was some guy her friend met at a bar, so I was like, okay then. Within 5 seconds, she backs the truck into a drainage ditch and gets it stuck. We all have to push the truck and get covered in mud. While we're doing that, the girl I met at the bar had lost her wallet. So I dug through the mud water ditch at like 4 a.m. and didn't find her wallet. We get back to her place and the mood is definitely ruined. So we end up eating a random cheese and meat platter from Safeway on her kitchen floor at like 4 a.m. I sleep on the couch and wake up early and I think, well, she was great. It was just the whole truck thing that ruined it. I look for a pen and paper to write down my number before leaving. All I can find is a piece of paper taped to the inside of the door. It was a court date for a domestic violence/abuse hearing. I just left and chalked it up as a strange night. When he asked me to change my clothes because they weren't sexy enough and told me what I had to order for food, he ended the date by talking about his gun collection. Blind date set up by my grandparents. I love my granddad, and he's done so much for me, so I went. We met at a bar where my best friend worked. We get drinks and I'm talking to my friend. My date says, "This homo trying to hook up with you?" 1, he's not gay. 2, it wouldn't matter if he was. 3, he was just checking in on me. So I'm already done with him at this point, but my ride is still over an hour away. His mate shows up at one point and starts trying to flirt with me. It was gross. My date then starts asking about my hot friends and if I can get them to come out. I said, I like my friends, so no. He starts being racist against Pacific Islanders and was horribly rude to this German guy there drinking. When my ride gets there, I said, I'm leaving. He says, I got a big one for you. You should come home with me. I said, thanks, but I'd rather gouge out my eyes. The next day, he messaged me and said, you probably think I'm I'm a bit of a jerk after last night, but do you want to go out again? I had no intentions of ever seeing him again, so I explained why his behavior was unacceptable and suggested he try making friends who are girls so he sees them as something other than a hole to stick his prick in. I told my grandparents everything. They told his parents, and apparently his dad was super embarrassed. My grandparents were then informed to stay out of my love life, and anytime they brought it up, I just say, "I got a big one for you, you should come home with me." I work in fine dining. A friend of mine showed up to my restaurant on a first date with a guy who arrived drunk as a skunk. She's an absolutely beautiful, hilarious woman with a great career. Truly a catch. Friday night, full restaurant. Their tables in the middle of the floor where everyone could see. He continued to burn through 3 bottles of wine, started making some bad jokes about her looking loose. She suggested he stop drinking. He reached across the table and slapped her. We all ushered her out, and a bunch of men at the other tables were about to beat his butt, but we held them back until he paid his bill. He didn't have enough money and said he was planning on making her split the $300 tab with him. We called the cops. Bye, Patrick. Another time, I helped a woman sneak out the back of our restaurant after eavesdropping on her horrible date. Their table was right by the service station. He'd spent the entirety of the date complaining about his ex-girlfriend's eating disorder. From the moment they sat down and ordered drinks. "Oh wow, you're having wine? That's so refreshing. My ex was anorexic. She had to count calories of everything." And the dude just never stopped. The woman dipped out in between the first and second course. He did a racist impression of his Asian professor while we were having dinner in a Vietnamese restaurant. He picked me up and drove though, so I couldn't leave on the spot. When we got in his car after dinner, he asked if I wanted to go back to his place. I made up an excuse as to why I couldn't. He made 2 calls on Bluetooth to hang out with other people while I was still in the car. It wasn't even while driving back. The car was still in park. All of this happened in about 10 minutes. I got to the bar after him. He had a glass of water on the table and slid it to me after I sat down. I said it's okay, he could have it, and I would wait to get my own. He scoffed and told me I don't know anything about being roofied, and I do. At 3 minutes in, he asked me if he could add me on Facebook so that he could touch himself to my photos. He told me I should stop going to the gym because he could barely get me as is, and if I lost weight, I'd be too hot and he'd have no chance. He then tried to get me to go back to his place, and I declined. He offered to let me sleep on his couch to make the idea more appealing. He then bragged about how much money he had, asked me how short I was on rent, saying he'd give me the money right now. I was not short on rent, and never said I was. Told me he could afford an UberX but would buy me an Uber pool home because he didn't know me that well. Lastly, he asked me not to BS him and be honest. Would I go on a second date with him? I said no. He stood up and screamed at me in the bar about how I'm the most shallow person he'd ever met, and that the only possible reason I would say no is because he's not good looking enough for me. He stared at my chest the entire time and told me he was in love with me. We had known each other 3 days. What made you straight up nope out of a relationship? How about things that should have been red flags, but I was too naive to recognize? Left notes on my car windshield when I was at work or a friend's house or the store. It seemed sweet, but I realized later that was my significant other keeping tabs on me, even when I didn't say where I was. Would let me know how much a hitman cost and that it was cheaper than you'd expect. Would tell me something and then later say that it was a lie or a test, as though I should have figured that out instead of expecting the truth. Expected me to answer every call, and would get angry if I wanted to end the call first. And lastly, complained about my friends and family all the time. All of them. Apparently, everyone I knew was manipulative and or rude. I didn't figure out this was an attempt to isolate me until after we broke up. He had already shown very jealous tendencies and had smacked me over the head because he thought I was looking at a guy, so it wasn't good already. We were outside of his friend's house and his friend asked how I was doing, and he got mad at me for answering. I just got in my car and drove away. I kept having to call the cops to calm down my wife after she became addicted to a slew of prescription drugs. I told her doctors that opiates for a ruptured vertebra, stimulants for ADHD, Ambien for most nights to help her sleep, and an assortment of others for anxiety and depression, and more to combat side effects, made her violent. One of the times that I called the cops to calm the situation down during a bad episode just made me cry. All he had to say was that he had already been there and asked when it would stop. I thought I'd been holding things together reasonably well. I had an office job where no one knew what was up, though my work had suffered greatly. I kept clothes and food in my trunk, just in case I had to stay out for a bit because she decided I was part of the conspiracy. I had a gym on the way to work where I could shower or just have some downtime. I did all of our housework and errands because she couldn't work or do much of anything most of the time. Each time she cut herself, she told the hospital it was an accident, and she always tried to go to a different one. We lived in a major metro between hospitals. The cop saw through it. Being seen like that and knowing that even that lifestyle was running out hurt. I'm now recovering from the divorce and enjoying the calm. I still sometimes panic for no reason, and I feel more comfortable with clothes and food stashed in the trunk, but I feel much healthier. I get more sleep, my blood pressure is normalized for the most part, and I don't cry at work anymore. I received a message that clearly wasn't meant for me. We had just had our first date, which went really well, calling me cheap and a slimeball and how I'm on my last chance to make things right on her coming birthday with lots of presents. I replied, "Hi, this is X. We just met and had one date. Was that message for someone else?" She replied pretending to be her 12-year-old sister. Then apparently her dad messaged me with how he's told off his younger daughter. I'm out. Screw that. Showing up at my door when I hadn't disclosed my address. For clarification, I'm a guy and we'd only just started dating. I'm very aware of giving out my address until I know who I'm dealing with. I don't want to end up with a stalker if things go sour. It happened anyway in this case. After maybe 2 years of him constantly trying to make me jealous, we temporarily had a 16-hour time difference as I was traveling home to see my grandparents. When I was asleep for maybe 7 hours because, well, it was nighttime and hadn't responded to his 50 texts, he finally said that he was going to spend some time with other girls for 7 hours that day because that's how long I was probably going around spreading my legs. I don't know why, but at that moment, it was like a moment of clarity, and I just replied okay, blocked him, his family, and all his friends, and just moved on. He followed me on a night out and got on his knees stopping traffic in the middle of a city center street to declare his love. We'd been on 2 dates. He also told me that same night he could see into the future and already knew he was going to die defending my honor while I was carrying our twins. Yeah, he was fun. She told me she was on birth control. Turns out she thought drinking a lot of Mountain Dew would make it so she couldn't get pregnant. We were married for 6 years. I started out thinking she was just struggling with depression and anxiety sometimes, but things kept escalating. I walked away when she started threatening to stab me in my sleep. We had already tried several couples therapists and individual therapists, but she refused to consider medication. I called her to meet up and try to find some closure, but she cut me off telling me I wasn't allowed to leave her and as punishment, she was sleeping with 2 other guys. At that point, I just ignored her number and filed for divorce. I hope she's doing well, but I'm glad to not be afraid for my life anymore. We weren't in a relationship per se, but I had a developing thing with a guy once. Until one day when I wasn't around, he and some other friends of ours went to a bar, and he sneakily slipped stronger alcohol into some other girl's drink there. This girl was apparently talking a lot with one of our other friends and not showing much attention to him. So he grew jealous and threw this friend on the floor and started to strangle him. He was obviously thrown out of the bar after that, and later tried to play it off as just a joke and just messing around. How do you jokingly try to strangle someone? Anyway, I dropped this guy out of my life right after I found out. I definitely wouldn't want to be stuck with someone like that. My most recent ex would always ask me random questions, like, what would you do if someone came running towards us right now? Bearing in mind that's pretty vague, I'd answer something like, move out of the way so they can keep running. And she'd say, wrong answer. Then get mad at me because she meant to attack us, and I didn't say I'd jump in the way to defend her. And she used to ask all sorts of very different vague questions, and when I'd answer, she'd say, wrong answer, and get mad at me for not answering the way she wanted me to. Got out of there as quickly as I could. She picked me because I had the same first name, general appearance, and lived in the same area of the state as her ex-fiance of 2 years, that she had just been dumped by a month before we met. I felt even more offended about all of that than just being straight up rejected. I'm a black person. My bestest buddy in the whole world is a white person. We were roomies at one point. He brought a date over, I met her, nothing weird. But as it turned out, she had a problem with my bromeo living with a black person, being me. He immediately broke it off with her. I don't have many friends, but I'd like to think I have quality over quantity. I had a huge crush on her for a while, but never had the opportunity to talk to her given our weird work schedules. Then a friend from work sets us up, and I was elated. First date goes really well, and we hit it off. We start spending as much time as we can around each other, talking on the phone every night, all the special things you do when you're starting a new relationship. Then she starts coming over more often unannounced. She would stay for a couple of nights, then a week, then 2 weeks. I would come home from work and she would be in my house, sometimes drunk. The thing was, she had almost been fired for an incident involving alcohol before and was lying to them about her sobriety. She would have a few too many, then go off about her family or how I wasn't taking our 2-month relationship serious enough. The final straw dropped on Valentine's Day this year. She gets annihilated to the point of not being able to walk on her own. After I refuse her drunk advances, she flips out. What followed was a couple hours of her threatening to drive home drunk, sitting outside so the cold weather would freeze her to death, laying in my bed and wailing my name until her voice was hoarse, and alternating between maniac laughter and crying. 2 days later, once she was sobered up, I told her to kick rocks. We had dated for just around 3 months. Quickest turnaround ever for me in a relationship. This happened on the second date. For context, we'd known each other since we were kids, flirted a lot over the years as casual friends, not close friends, just acquaintances, then decided to try dating in our 20s. Him: do you want to get married someday? Me: maybe, I don't know. I'm not even sure if marriage is right for me. I kinda just want to travel and build a career and stuff. That's all I'm thinking about right now. Him: what about in 5 years' time? Me: I don't know, maybe. I mean, if it's the right man, maybe. Him: I've loved you ever since we were kids. Me: thanks. Him: if we were together 5 years from now, would you marry me? Me: I'm not really sure. Spoiler alert, at this point, I'm desperate to run away. Him: I'd hit a girl if she didn't marry me after 5 years, like straight up beat her. Yeah. Bye-bye to the friendship too. She talked a lot about hating guys being cheap on dates. First date, I take her to a really good sushi place and spend like $120 cause I wanted to be nice. She said she would pay for us next time cause she was extremely flattered. For the second date, she chose the place, and she took me to McDonald's. For context, she isn't broke, even gets triple what I make. Like, I don't really care where you take me, but come on, man. Why set the bar so high only to immediately ignore it when you have to be even? She told everybody she knew about any little disagreement. Anytime I could be perceived as unreasonable, it was everybody's business. But somehow the surprises, special dates, lending her cousin rent money, all of that was never brought up. Just the negative stuff was public knowledge. Genuinely feared for my safety. I went over and we got in an argument, so I slept on the floor essentially. I went to the bathroom to text one of my buddies to come pick me up, since I thought she'd fallen asleep. I suddenly get a text from her saying, "Where are you?" And my phone made a sound. I froze up and opened the bathroom door, and she was already standing there waiting for me in the darkness. She didn't say a word at all, just stared at me until I walked by. I went back to my spot on the floor and got under the blanket and pretended to be going asleep until she did. After about 30 minutes, I decided to peek out from under the covers, and she was literally towering over me in the darkness with her eyes wide open the entire time. I got out of there so fast. He didn't have a car, so I'd help him with rides to work. He worked third shift at Toys R Us stocking shelves. I picked him up one night, and he was so drunk he could barely stand. I made some comment about how he isn't going to be able to work. He started throwing things at me in the parking lot. I threw his stuff on the ground and left him there. I've dealt with too many alcoholics, and I wasn't wasting any more of my time. Cut to 5 years later, he's sober now and getting married this year, so good for him. My brother came to visit me. After I spent the whole day with my girlfriend, it was time to see my brother because we didn't see each other for a long time. We prepared some snacks and were about to start Lord of the Rings because both of us love Lord of the Rings. She called me and started a long conversation on the phone. I told her my brother was waiting for me, and she said that I can't spend my time with anyone because it belongs to her. It was the last talk between the two of us. We had dinner plans. She didn't show up and didn't pick up her phone all evening. Then she turned up at around midnight in her car hammered. I tried to take her keys and she ran out of the house. I followed. She then drove her car at me. I called her brother to come pick her up. The next morning, I dropped her car and her belongings at her place and said goodbye. We went to the mall and stopped by this little kiosk selling cookies. I decided that I would get one cookie. The lady working there said if I buy two, I get one free. I decided to buy two and get the third one free. My date went off on this lady saying she's trying to scam me, etc., etc. He was legit yelling so loud that it was echoing through the mall. It was so embarrassing. If you're rude to people in customer service, you're not for me. When my now ex-wife came to the living room where I was sleeping on the couch after a fight and started lunging at me, she asked me if she reminded me of my stepdad who used to come in my room at night and stand over me before he dragged me out of bed by my ankles. He would then put the boots to me for whatever sins I had committed that day. She was the only person I had ever shared this with. She went out of town for work 2 days later, and when she came home, I was gone and in another state. It was remarkable the amount of abuse I put up with to that point. It dawned on me then that if he had returned to my life, I wouldn't let him hurt me. So there was no reason to let her abuse me either. I dated this girl who was jealous, and I mean super jealous. I couldn't hang out with any of my friends without her constantly calling me. Obviously, I couldn't do the same because how could I be jealous? That would have meant I didn't trust her. That's annoying enough to end a relationship, but it was just the tip of the iceberg. After 9 months, I found out from one of my friends, who also happened to be a close friend of hers, that she'd been hiding her sexuality to me. She was actually bi. At first, I didn't really get why she did that, because I absolutely have no problem with these things. A mutual friend then told me she was going around messing around with other chicks. So basically she was hiding her bisexuality so that she could have sex with any girl she wanted to without me even suspecting anything. Sometimes she even had threesomes with the girls' boyfriends. When I told her I knew everything, she started telling me that she didn't want me to know because those people didn't really matter for her and she didn't love them. Needless to say, I noped out of there. It was already on the rocks from roughly around the time the millionth drunken argument happened. However, the moment that sealed it was when she said something to me along the lines of, "If your dad wanted to be alive, he would still be here." My dad died in a car accident 3 years before that. Immediately went from loving her enough to make it work to thinking that she was the most vile person on earth. My brother took a girl to a high-end sushi place, and his date ordered 3 times the food he did. He just got a grilled salmon. She ate almost none of it, and at the end, she said she ordered all the extras so she could take some home for tomorrow. When the waiter showed up for the bill, she excused herself to go to the bathroom. The waiter asked my brother if he wanted to split the check, and at that point, my brother did the right thing and stuck her with $100 worth of sushi and booze. The girl returned to see a huge check at her seat. After our first date, she sent me a Google Maps pin of my address with just "ha ha" as the only context. I hadn't told her my address. She then followed it up with asking how my boss was by using his first name. I hadn't mentioned the name of anyone I worked with. That level of stalker made me pull the eject handle real quick. It started with me telling her that it must have been great to grow up with parents from different cultures on the second date, after her talking uninterrupted about her family's background for 45 minutes. No irony from me or anything, just a straight up positive and genuine comment. This was followed by 30 minutes of full emotional breakdown in a packed bar and loud comments about my perception of race, which was then followed by intense stare downs from every patron in the bar, which was then followed by the waiter swooping in with shots for her, asking to pay her bill, and asking me if I needed to leave. I felt bad about triggering some sort of trauma, but yeah. I was publicly accused of racism on the second date. Always wondered what the third date had in store, but didn't stick around to find out. She showed up late at my place one night because she couldn't sleep at her place alone. I was fine with that until she started talking about the reason why. When she was alone, the demons in the corners and edges of the room would fill the dark spots and watch with their glowing eyes. I urged her continuously to get help, to go to the doctor, but she wouldn't do it. What she was seeing was real. I felt terrible leaving her for that, but I wasn't equipped to deal with someone who needed professional help and refused it. She came to stay for the first time. It was the night before New Year's Eve and we were planning to go out drinking for New Year's Eve. I had just worked a 12-hour shift. I was a carpet fitter, so manual labor, and I was exhausted. She had a few drinks and started to get aggressive, because I just wanted to relax that night, but she wanted to go out drinking. We broke up 3 days later. My father was an aggressive drunk when I was a kid, so I could see how it would go. If you know you're an aggressive drunk, get off the drink, man. I was interested in this woman I worked with many years ago, and the feeling was mutual. We had gone bowling a couple of times and we had started talking about potentially dating. She said, if we date, I expect to be taken out at least twice a week, given gifts at least once a week, and we won't have sex for at least 3 months. Considering we had almost the same work schedule, I have no idea how she thought I was going to pull any of that off. Her father recently got into a brawl with a date's teenage kid. I was concerned and asked questions. She then explained how the teen had it coming because they didn't know their place. Feeling confused, I asked her to elaborate again. It turned out that a grown man punched a mentally disabled autistic teen rather than simply walk away. I told her that I refuse to date people who are cool with domestic violence. She was immediately remorseful, but then defended her father's drunken violent outburst against a child a few moments later. Don't date people who think that an adult ought to beat mentally disabled children. Not even a relationship, but got very close. Met a guy through a local theater, and I thought he was cool. But then he started following me around everywhere when I was at practice and shows. The last straw was when I didn't get notified that a practice had been canceled, and he was waiting there, saying, "I just felt like someone would show up." And it absolutely raised my alarm bells. Worst part is, when I tried to get help from the director or other actors, they'd ignore me, or try to tell me that he's just trying to be nice and he can't help it. I blocked and deleted his number, and I'm sad to say I haven't gone back to public theater since, as he's still actively involved in most plays in town. I was going through some stuff in my early 20s and was pretty desperate for any kind of affection, which is the only reason I took a couple weeks to back out of this. The second time I ever met her, she told me to delete every girl's number from my phone, sister included. She then came over to my place, saw I had a bookshelf, and ridiculed me for being a reader, and in the same breath announced that she loved cocaine so much and wanted me to try it. Finally, I escaped, but by then she was already sleeping with 2 of my friends, who are obviously no longer my friends. The good news is I've now been happily married for 5 years and consider myself so incredibly lucky. When I wasn't allowed to hang out with my male friends in broad daylight, but he thought it was okay to hang out with girls he didn't know in the middle of the night, that was a major red flag. I was dating a really cool guy and everything was going great. And then about a month in, he started talking baby talk to me, and it did not stop. We had been together for quite a while, 6 to 8 months, and lived together for at least 2 months when I decided to make a tuna salad. I asked how he liked it. He told me. I came back with 2 bowls. Half the can made his way, and half the can made the way I liked it. He completely freaked out. He said, "If we can't agree on how to eat tuna, how will this ever work?" I said that we don't have to agree. We can both have it exactly the way we want and be happy. He strongly disagreed. I started thinking of all of his other controlling behavior and inability to compromise. It wasn't that day that we broke up, but it was definitely the day our relationship broke. The cheating didn't help either. Waiters of Reddit, what's the most messed up conversation you've overheard while waiting tables? I was bringing a check for a wealthy local businessman who was dining with his girlfriend. It was a big tab and I was already counting the tip when the woman hurled his drink in his face and yelled to an aghast room of people, "You didn't even pay for the abortion!" and stormed out. The man calmly brushed the ice off of his suit and looked around and said, "Not the first time, won't be the last." I wheeled off and gave him the bill later. I had a couple that came in with their kid. It's slow and we have time to take it slow, so I'm just relaxing there when I see the couple getting into an argument. It's clear from the facial expressions that they're getting into a heated argument. Just as I'm about to come over with the bill, before it got even worse, she throws her drink at his face, throws the food on the ground, and leaves with the kid. He's stranded at the restaurant since she took the car and awkwardly stays here for about an hour. We tried to make him comfortable, but it was incredibly awkward. After he left, the police came to our restaurant about 3 hours later asking if he ate here. Turns out he died that night in a hit and run. St. Patrick's Day, working at a pretty busy bar in San Diego. Waiting on a table of fraternity guys from SDSU. No big deal. I take the order and notice something is seriously off with one of the guys. Not like he was hammered or anything, but he was just making a weird face. The bar was crowded and noisy, so his bros didn't notice it. But I walked up by him and was like, "Are you okay?" He looked at me, pale as a ghost, and said, "I just pooped my pants. It's everywhere. It's in my shoes." Now, as a man who's been there, I felt I had to help out. I also worked security at this place, so grabbed the attention of one of the big Tongan bouncers. Took the bouncer aside, and if you don't know this, Tongans are some of the most helpful people around, and told him the deal as I'm starting to smell and see poop. The next thing I know, the 3 big Tongan doormen come out of nowhere and muscle this guy out, just saying the usual, "Sorry guys, but your friend has to go." They took him in the back and already had a clean pair of boxers and jeans for the guy, and let him clean up in the staff bathroom, and one of them actually gave him a ride home. I was busy and didn't see him leave, but got a cool note from their fraternity the next day and an honorary sweatshirt and a gift certificate to Best Buy. I still have it somewhere. He got to save face with the girls they were with, and they were all regulars after that, and tipped really well. There was this group of 4 elderly women who would come into my family's restaurant once a month. One month, one of them came by herself. I asked, "Hi Edith, where are all your friends?" "They all died." And she broke into tears. I felt like crap the rest of the night. I worked at a high-end bistro during summers in college, and the rule was even if we were closing at 11 and someone came in at 10:59, we served them. So this older, attractive white man in his 60s came in with a small but built Asian guy in his 20s. They sat across each other at a two-top and just ordered wine and dessert. This was pretty typical, and as they were my last table, I could leave after I had bussed their table and tipped out. So I started packing up the silverware and menus at the tables in my section and doing my other closing duties. I was walking by their table and heard they were having a heated yet quiet argument, as if they didn't want to make a scene. I heard snippets of, "No, $600 and you spend the night," by the older male, and "No, $800, blowjob, 1 round of butt stuff, and I leave when I'm done." And I was mentally like, okay, and left them to negotiate alone. Yeah, I would probably do the same thing. Just let them sort out their business. I mean, it's not as if you can chime in on a conversation like that, right? I was a Waffle House waitress for 4 years in high school. I saw and heard quite a bit. I honestly got used to old truckers asking me if I wanted to make an extra tip in the parking lot at the grand old age of 16. But the one time I literally had to say WTF, I didn't even understand the conversation. 2 Latino couples were sharing a booth and seemed to be having a good time. I don't speak Spanish, but nothing in their tone made it seem unusual. Out of nowhere, one of the husbands grabs his wife by the back of her hair, slams her face into the table, and just goes about his conversation. He didn't even look at her. She wiped her face off and just went back to talking and listening. No one batted an eye at the table. I delivered their food a few minutes later, and all 4 of them seemed like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I've called out dozens of customers in my day. You can say pretty much whatever you want as a Waffle House waitress since it's not exactly a classy joint, but I had no idea how to respond to that scenario. I once waited on a couple that broke up while I was waiting on them. They came separately. The wife showed up first. She was very chipper and friendly, and I grabbed her a water while she was waiting on her husband. The husband showed up around 10 minutes later. When I went to the table to grab his drink, I could hear her saying, "What's wrong? What's your deal? Just talk to me." While I was waiting at the bar for his drink, one of the hosts ran up to me and said, "Hey, I think your table's breaking up." I look up to the corner where they're sitting and the wife is sobbing. Now what do? I have to bring him his drink, even though surely they aren't going to stay and eat now, right? Wrong. I brought him his drink, and when I set it down in front of him, expecting him to tell me thanks but no thanks, we're leaving, he says, "Do you know what you want?" Through her tears, she says, yes, and orders. What the heck? I have to wait on these people now. I then have one of the most awkward tables of my life, having to keep up my peppy attitude and fake smiles while this poor woman's life is crashing down. When it was all over and I set the bill down in front of the husband, I figured he would at least be kind enough to pay the bill. Alas, he pushed it back to me and said, "Can you separate this, please?" This guy's so brutal, I'm surprised he didn't slide you divorce papers to sign as a witness as well. Not really messed up, but just a complete lack of understanding from a privileged person. I worked at a popular restaurant chain while I was in college. This was about 7 years ago. The owners of one of the largest beer breweries in the country came in to eat. They're sitting there eating and the wife says to the husband, "I don't understand what you mean by living paycheck to paycheck." He explains to her what living paycheck to paycheck actually means in a very respectful and unbiased fashion. She still doesn't get it. She questions why these people don't have any money left over after they pay their bills and why they don't just change that, or why their bills are so high, or why they don't just make more money. They were out to eat with another couple who also tried explaining this to her. A solid 10 minutes were spent on trying to educate this woman on the fact that most people don't live like she's used to. All of them sort of gave up trying when they realized she just didn't get it. You could literally see the confusion on her face. It gave me a new perspective on things. It was the last table of my last shift of my last day at this place. Two top, man and a woman. Both pretty attractive and looking extremely happy to be out on a date together. The meal goes smoothly. They ask for the check. I bring it. Upon returning to grab their credit card, I ask if they'd like me to box up their leftovers. He says sure, and just as I'm leaning in to grab her plate of pasta, she looks him dead in the eye while holding his hand and says, "I'm pregnant." I freeze a bit, then silently carry their plates back to the kitchen. I was so shocked that I was on autopilot mode and accidentally threw their leftovers away. The guy was not very hungry after that anyway. Too bad you threw it away. She's eating for two now, you know. I waited tables and bartended in the late 80s after college. Two ladies sat down at a table in my section. I greeted them and got them water. A man showed up and instantly turned pale. Turns out it was his wife and his girlfriend, and they had found out about each other and set him up. He had his head in his hands the whole time. I didn't hear a lot of what they were saying, but the pieces I did hear were unpleasant. Two guys sitting at my bar top, looking super shady, decided they were going to scout out for ladies. Now, if you've worked in a continuously loud environment, you know that people will say anything when they think you can't hear them. Man, that was stupid. What about the blonde with the blue dress? Nah, I was thinking of that one. He pointed to a smaller one, more fragile looking brunette, sitting by herself. They get quiet for a bit before the first guy asks, "Are you sure you want to do this?" The second guy, "That's what she gets for dressing like that. Let's hope she's parked in the back." I said screw that and called the police. They were asked to leave and one of the officers offered to follow the girl home. Kudos to our original poster on this one because he prevented what could have been a very dangerous situation for this girl. I waited tables at the Olive Garden 10 years ago. Not really messed up as much as it was funny. A guy and his wife sat down at a table and immediately started arguing. Something about his affair and how a baby from it was costing them money. Finally, it culminated as I was bringing out their salad, and as I walked away, I heard the wife say, "Maybe if you hadn't boned our son's girlfriend and gotten her pregnant, we could afford to eat somewhere nicer than Olive Garden. Oh look, the highlight of my meals, unlimited bagged salad. Maybe you could save up and we could go to Joe's Crab Shack for our anniversary." I hate to say it, but maybe this relationship should just come to an end at this point. That sounds like a messed up situation. A waitress at our restaurant, a wealthy but crazy 45-year-old divorcee, was written up 4 times for saying obscene things to guests. The last straw, she gave a plate of food to a man at the bar with a huge mustache and said, "Nice mustache, I'd like to sit on your face," and carried on back to the kitchen as if she'd said nothing at all. You hear a lot of things and I try not to judge, but the two that just stick out in my mind the most are number 1, the first time, please note that's the first, a mother handed me her child's bottle and asked me to fill it with Coke. And number 2 was a table of 3. A mom and her 2 kids, maybe about 7 and 5. She's ignoring me on her phone, not paying attention to anything. The kids are super polite, and I ask what they'd like to drink. And the little girl says, "Can we have some water, please, in the fun cups?" And the mother puts her phone down, snaps at that child, and I swear almost grabs her and says, "No, you'll have a Diet Coke. Get them a Diet Coke." "But Mom, we're thirsty." "Shut it. Kids just wanted some water. I don't understand people." I really don't understand why it had to be Diet Coke over water. Is there some secret added benefit to Diet Coke that I don't know about? People often don't realize that when you're sitting at the bar, the bartenders hear everything. Sometimes I talk with the guests, but sometimes people have really intense and private conversations like less than a meter away from me. I'll just keep my head down and rinse glasses and pour drinks and basically pretend I'm really busy. Just yesterday, there were 2 guys in their early 20s talking about how their girlfriends were total pains who nagged and complained all the time. They drank a lot of tequila and whiskey, and at one point, one guy said to the other, "You should just sleep in my place, you can't drive like this." The other disagreed, and they got into a drunken argument, and at one point the guy who suggested the sleepover grabbed the other guy's face and said, "F you," and then they just started making out, just out of the blue. Sloppy and drunk making out. It was weird and hilarious. This is my boss's story from when she used to work at a fast food joint. The cashier was a girl who had a short pixie haircut. There was a group of Jehovah's Witnesses that came in and insisted to my manager that they get a different cashier because they don't want any lesbians serving them. The girl was recovering from cancer and has been regrowing her hair. They were immediately kicked out. It was one of the rudest things I've ever heard. I was working as a hostess at a local chain restaurant. The host stand is right next to the bar. There was an older couple, probably in their 70s, eating and having a drink at the bar. They start to walk out with their arms around each other and giggling. Then the woman accidentally drops their box of leftovers. She starts cracking up and says, "I just tossed you a salad." And still with arms around each other, laughing hysterically, they walk out. Made my week. Had to throw in at least one nice story for you guys. Former waitress here. I used to work at a sports bar grill type place that did a pretty good weekday lunch business. One day, I was waiting on a group of guys at a round table having a work lunch. They were discussing business and sharing spreadsheets and things like that. At one point, I was walking up to the table to check on them, and the guy with his back towards me was fiddling with his BlackBerry. And as I get closer, I can see he's watching adult material. Keep in mind, this was long enough ago that internet on phones wasn't nearly as common as it is now, so it was kind of crazy. Dudes carrying on a conversation about financial strategies while watching adult content in the middle of a restaurant. I just got their refills and made sure to approach the table from a different angle when I came back. When I was in the front retail section of a certain country-style chain restaurant, I saw a very young boy studying the toys and gifts while his mother was talking to the hostess. At the time, we had a toy squid with a little propeller that was lazily drifting around the little display tank. Once he saw it, his eyes went wide and he yelled in shock, "That looks just like Mommy's toy!" All of the color drained from her face as she ran over, grabbed his wrist, and fled the restaurant, never to be seen again. Way to be subtle, kid. Jeez. I'm German, but live in an Asian country, so it's not very common to meet other people who are German. I was waitressing as a summer job, and one night I was serving this old man who was there with a group of friends. As soon as he sat down, he told his friends in German, "I wouldn't pay $10 to sleep with that slave," talking about one of my Filipino coworkers. I proceeded to continue serving the table the entire night, and the old guy kept on saying more messed up racist stuff about my other Filipino coworkers. When he asked for the bill, I let my coworkers know about the terrible stuff that guy had been saying. The manager, who was also Filipino, confronted him about it, but the old man denied all the allegations. It ended with the racist jerk paying and walking out of the restaurant, stammering to his friend, "How did he know what we were talking about?" I chose that moment to say to them in German with a huge grin, "Good night and thank you for dining with us." Needless to say, the expression on his face was priceless. Sometimes people say really horrible things about other people for no good reason just because they think others can't understand them. It's quite sickening, really. I waited on a table with two young couples on a date. As I approached to clear their table, I overheard them talking about sex. They immediately went quiet once they saw me approach, while smirking not too subtly to each other. I asked them if it was good, and they said they enjoyed it greatly. Upon which I asked, "And how was the food?" They erupted in laughter, and I got a very generous tip. Good times. I work as a bartender once a week. Just last night, an attractive couple came in. They honestly already looked halfway smashed. For a while, I thought I heard a faint buzzing noise, but didn't think much of it. As I come up behind them to serve them food, the lady embraced her man and said, "Oh God, turn this thing off before I lose my mind." I understand public displays of affection, but this is just incredibly awkward for anyone else around you. Please don't do this. I used to work at a family burger joint that was part of a large chain. We saw a lot of birthday parties and stressed out parents. This one afternoon, a smallish group came in to celebrate a toddler's birthday. There were 2 couples and 5 kids under the age of 5. Now, anyone getting this table would think, oh no. You're looking at a bunch of kids' meals, which means getting a bunch of drinks and refills for barely any cost and therefore barely any tip. But I figure I'll make this a fun party for them, and maybe they'll leave a nice tip out of gratitude. Yeah, right. The moment I get to this table, one of the women thrusts a bottle at me, saying it's breast milk which she wants me to heat up with hot water. I smile and say no problem. Hungry babies are crying babies, and it's not like I'd be grossed out by breast milk, especially when it's in a bottle. I'm sure she wants the milk quickly, so I hand the job off to my supervisor while I get the other 9 drinks for the table. When I get back to my section with the drink tray, the lady stands up and yells at me, "If you have a problem with someone, why don't you say it to their face?" It took me a moment to realize that she thought I'd handed the milk to my supervisor because I was grossed out by it. "Oh, no," I said. "There's no problem, ma'am. I just knew I'd be a minute with these other drinks and I figured you'd get the milk sooner, so..." "I don't want to hear it. This is terrible customer service and I'm disgusted." Turning to her friends, she told them, still yelling, "I can't even be here anymore. I'm sorry, but this party is ruined. I'm leaving." And she marched out, dragging her now crying children and leaving both my shift leader and I standing agape in the middle of the section. The worst part was, her friends had to try and finish their poor child's birthday party after this. The birthday boy was crying, and his parents looked like they might want to join him. And of course, no apologetic tip or words were forthcoming. Yeah, I hate to say it, but a lot of the times you're not going to get a tip in that situation. They're not going to be in a great mood, meaning they're not going to be feeling very generous towards you. So you get to deal with all that for pretty much nothing. Sorry. I generally try not to eavesdrop on my guests, and at busy times I find myself keeping 5 or 6 different objectives prioritized in my brain, so I don't hear a lot. Every so often, though, a certain word or turn of phrase will make it through and capture my attention. The most recent of these that comes to mind was a lady I'd guess to be in her mid-20s who, completely straight-faced, told her dining partner, "No, seriously, dead is way better than broken up. At least with dead, I know where he is and what he's up to." That's a little concerning. Maybe you should have called the police. I walked up to the table with a young newly married couple. They seemed to be in conversation, but I was busy, so I didn't have time to wait for them to finish. As soon as I walked up, I heard the girl say, "If you ever lie to me again, I swear to God I will poop on your pillow." There was an awkward pause before I said, "Hi, what can I get y'all to drink?" I worked at a fine dining restaurant during college. Overlooking the lake, white tablecloths, $300 bottle of wine, the whole bit. One night, the matriarch of a family company that is incredibly wealthy and well-known came in with some of the company's executives. It's my table, but a large one. So one of our male servers, I'm female, was helping me take initial drink orders. The entire group ignores me and speaks only to him. My first clue that maybe this isn't going to go well. But whatever, that's fine. Maybe they're just confused about who the lead server is. I pop out to the bar to start getting their drinks from the bar staff. And while I'm out there, our maitre d' comes up to me, "Your table has requested that male server to be the one to take care of them." Ouch. Okay, there goes the money I'm going to make tonight, but okay. Later, I'm walking past their table with a few dirty dishes in my hands, and I hear the matriarch say, "Now there's her proper place." This was in 2011. About a month ago, I served a couple that was celebrating their 30th anniversary. They were dressed to the nines and looking very happy together. I offered to take a picture of them when I saw them awkwardly attempting a selfie. I shot a few pictures and handed her the phone back. When I went to take his empty plate, I noticed he had kind of a frantic look on his face, but I couldn't gauge the situation. Turns out, the phone was his, not hers. 5 minutes later, she's flipping out about a girl named Candy, who he was apparently texting during their anniversary dinner. Dude obviously didn't care at all. They end up in an all-out brawl, with everyone in the restaurant watching. Needless to say, I got stiffed for the $110 check, and I'm sure he'll always blame me for getting caught. Redditors who grew up with strict parents, what was the craziest rule or punishment you had to deal with? When I was in first grade, I had a writing homework assignment. My dad used to be weird about me erasing because he wanted me to do it right the first time. I ended up erasing a lot on this homework, and my dad took the paper from me, ripped it in half, and told me to start over. Turns out it was the last sheet of paper in the entire house, and I don't remember why, but for some reason we couldn't go and buy more paper that night. So, ironically, I ended up having to completely erase an old homework assignment in order to have a sheet of paper to start over on. I'm 22 now and still give him crap about this. How is starting over on a new piece of paper any different than erasing what you were already doing? I don't really understand the logic on this one. The word disgusting was banned and could have been considered just as bad as saying the F word. We weren't allowed to close doors unless we were in the bathroom. We weren't allowed to watch Cartoon Network because it was garbage. They actually put a parental lock on Cartoon Network. The worst punishment was one time they decided that we were such bad kids, my sister was like 14 and I was 12-ish, that they took everything we owned and bagged it up into garbage bags and made us carry them out to a burn pile, and they burnt everything we owned. All of my childhood memorabilia, pictures, clothes, diaries, everything. All of it burnt. It was kind of messed up. When it was done burning, the next day or so later, my sister and I looked through the ashes, and all that was left were 2 silver rings of hers that we cleaned off and kept. It was kind of crazy. I once got beaten and locked in the basement because my hands were literally not large enough to play a certain piano piece. I couldn't play an octave separation yet. Before you ask, yes, I am Asian. I didn't ask, but makes sense. I wasn't allowed to use public restrooms. I ruined our Disney trip because of how many times we had to go back to the hotel, which wasn't on site. And I was 6 years old at the time. I quite honestly had accidents when I was far too old to do so because my parents had my teachers reporting bathroom use to them too. There was no place I could safely use the restroom other than home. Without getting into trouble, that is. Finally, I got to use public restrooms without punishment when I went to college. No, I'm not kidding. But I got pretty good at hiding restroom use in high school because the high school refused to report it to my parents. Why did none of these teachers spot the abuse? My parents once grounded me for 2 years for getting a B on my report card. Took everything out of my room besides the bed, and I wasn't allowed to do anything with friends. A year and a half into it, I asked if I could be ungrounded. And at that point, they'd actually forgotten what they'd grounded me for, but refused because I must have done something bad if they grounded me. Also, they refused to let me stay up past 8 p.m., even in high school. If it's not important enough for you to remember, then it's not important enough to take away all of your kids' stuff for 2 whole years. When I was in elementary school at about 6 years old, I used to have accidents because my bladder was too small. My mom would punch me in the bladder when I got home to make me pee myself and make fun of me when I did. I still have issues, and it turns out that my bladder and uterus is messed up from a genetic disease. That's actually just messed up. No talking at the dinner table other than the occasional "do you want some more blank" or "pass the blank." We couldn't talk about anything at all. No small or idle chat was allowed. First time you did it, you got yelled at. Second time was a whooping and then sent to your room until the next day, without the rest of your meal. I make it a point now with my kids to chat up a storm each and every meal. You could earn a full-on whooping for uttering any of the following: shut up, but, or accusing someone of lying for any reason. We were not permitted to use the words lie, liar, or lying. Instead, we had to say, "That's not the truth," or "That doesn't sound right," or any other phraseology that wasn't some iteration of the word lie. This sounds like there's some deeper damage going on in your parents' psyche around the word lie. Otherwise, I don't see why they'd be so sensitive about the word. As the eldest son of a Southern Baptist preacher, I was held to some high standards. Being seen and not heard, and that my every action was a reflection of my father as a leader to his congregation. I found music to be a great outlet, but of course any non-Christian music was not allowed and immediately destroyed upon discovery. Spare the rod, spoil the child was a mantra ingrained in my daily life. Once I was into my teens and spankings with stretched out coat hangers was no longer enough to be considered punishment due to the lack of tears, my father moved on to shaving my head. Nothing like the constant reminder of how untrustworthy one is once their physical source of personal identity is forcibly removed. As soon as you said Southern Baptist preacher, I knew this was going to be bad. My mother is an honest-to-God narcissist. I graduated from high school early at 16 and didn't go to college immediately, so I worked a part-time job while all my friends went to school. Anyways, when all my friends graduated high school, we celebrated by going to the movies. My friend's mom dropped us off and another friend's father was going to be picking us up. My mom was very upset at me going to the movie anyways, since it wasn't going to be over until after 9 p.m., by bedtime at the time. Anyways, finally she lets me go on the condition that my friend's dad gets me home by 10 p.m. My friend's father ran into late night construction on the way home with me and several other friends in the van, and the closer it got to 10 p.m., the more I started freaking out, telling everyone I was going to be in huge trouble if I didn't get home like right now. My friend's father assured me he would speak to my mom and all would be fine. I was the first to be dropped off because I was panicking so severely. The moment the van pulls into the driveway, my mom comes barreling out of the house, telling me she was going to kick my butt for being late and keeping her up. My friend's dad tried to calm her down and separate her from hitting me. That's when she realizes I'm chewing gum. Now, my mother hated gum. Said the only reason you would ever chew gum was to hide something. So naturally, she makes the assumption I was late and chewing gum because I was busy fooling around with my friend's dad. Yeah, that was the only explanation in her mind. She grounded me for 12 weeks, an entire summer. I wasn't allowed to have a phone, cell phone, TV, or books the entire summer. Every morning, my mom would take the cable box, home phone handset, and keyboard to make sure I couldn't do anything. Needless to say, my friends never invited me anywhere again in fear that my mom would call the cops and accuse me of fooling around with their dad. She also used to report my car stolen if I didn't call her back when I was in college. What's going on with your mom that's the first thing that her mind goes to? Who does she think you are? Shouldn't she be more confident in how she raised you? I dealt with a narcissistic and abusive mother, and most of my punishments weren't huge because I was a really good kid. But on my 18th birthday, because I asked for gas money the day before, the first time ever, she took mine and her car keys with her to work, and took the shed key so I couldn't even ride my bike. She left a note on the kitchen table saying, "Happy 18th, now you're an adult, so get out of my house." I spend my birthday alone, trapped, and miserable. All over $10. One day, the news said the school might be closed for a cold day. Like a snow day, but when it's cold enough, your exposed skin freezes in less than 10 minutes. My mom demanded I start walking to school or she'd report me to the cops as truant. We argued about it, but the TV said school started late that day. I decided to go anyways. That being better than the arguing. She then decided I was to stay home for her to call the cops. I shoved past her, which she yelled at me was assault, and then locked me out of the house. Halfway to school, I was told the school was closed. I had to call my dad to be let into the house again. That day, I promised myself I'd leave home as soon as possible. I've stayed halfway across the country from my mom ever since. Your mom sounds like the type of person that's just looking for and wants to start problems. I don't blame you for wanting to get out of there as soon as possible. My mom was raised in a very strict and abusive environment. When my sister and I became teenagers, she was struggling with mental health issues and also never had a good example of what level-headed parenting looked like. It doesn't excuse some of the things she did, but I'm more understanding now that I'm older. Anyway, the craziest, most out-of-hand moment. My sister and I are 16 months apart in age and had a lot of the same friends in high school. When I was 14 and she was 15, our curfew was 9, but we got a summertime curfew of 10 o'clock. This was before everyone had a cell phone. Our friend was watching the time, but we got caught up in our night games. We were literally playing hide and seek. We lost track of time and realized at 5 after 10 that we were late. and managed to get home by 10 after. My mom was furious and made us sit down at the kitchen table for a 30-minute lecture, during which she slammed a utensil so hard on a plate in front of my sister that glass shards flew into her face. My sister got up and left the room at that point, but when I tried to do the same, my mom put me in a headlock, like freaking WWE style, and I punched her in the back to get her to let go. My sister and I were both grounded for something like 2 weeks, and I got an extra week for hurting my mom. The most ridiculous punishment? My sister, at age 16, picked up smoking cigarettes. She'd been at it for a week. I told her it was on her own head and that it wasn't worth it and she should stop, but she kept doing it. Whatever, not my problem. She, like an idiot, pressed her luck and brought cigarettes into the house, where my mom found them in her room. Our mom would go through our stuff constantly. I literally had to hide any CD with profanity or things like permanent markers that we could get high off of. They separated us and played good cop, bad cop. My sister, again, the idiot, totally bought it when my mom told her I'd blabbed about everything and they knew the truth. I was in the other room denying any knowledge or involvement. Anyway, this happened a week before summer vacation. My sister was grounded for the entire summer vacation. 2 months, no friends, no going out, 10 minutes of phone time a day, no electronics, no internet, no pool, no movie theater, nothing. My punishment? The exact same thing. For not coming to my parents and telling on my sister. My parents also decided to sand and paint the baseboards that summer and forced us to do it all. That summer was literally the worst. I spent a large portion of my teen years being grounded for minor things, or for not being the sister spy. It sucked, especially considering I got decent if not great grades, never drank, smoked, tried drugs, had sex, skipped class, or otherwise got into any kind of trouble. I'm almost 30 and about to have my second kid, and I'm still a little salty about it. My parents tried so hard to keep us from experiencing normal teenage stuff that both me and my sister made some really poor choices once we had the tiniest amount of freedom. That's something I think a lot of parents aren't aware of, is that the harder you push, the harder they pull away. You're gonna be this super strict about your kid, then yeah, the second they have some freedom, they're gonna go nuts. And they don't know how to control themselves because they've never gotten to enjoy fun before. It makes sense that they're gonna get a little carried away. No TV. Not as a punishment, just no TV, ever. Because apparently it lets the devil in. The second I, as the last kid, moved out, they started watching TV all the time. As punishment, my dad would make us face a corner, stand on one leg, and keep both arms straight up in the air for a certain length of time. If our leg or arms went down, he'd double the time. Sometimes he'd give you a surprise visit from his belt or shoe if he was particularly angry. At least I grew up to have fantastic balance. My grandmother was a retired English teacher. One day, I called my brother stupid. I was 4 or so. She filled me in on her rule that if I couldn't spell stupid, but I called someone stupid, then it was really me that was stupid. Thus, I should never call someone a name that I couldn't spell. So, in my 4-year-old head, rather than avoid name calling, I realized that I did know how to spell the word dumb. So that word must be permitted. I spent the rest of the day overusing the word dumb, and she wasn't quite sure what to do at that point. My mom gave me a black eye one night when I came home from a friend's birthday party at a skate rink. She made me tell people that I fell down and got hit in the eye by one of the wheels on a skate. I was 12. It was because I forgot to put away the dishes before I left. She also regularly broke remote controls, throwing them at me, would slam my doors open so hard the doorknobs would smash through the drywall, stole the allowance my granddad gave me, no matter where I hid it, and recently ripped a pair of my headphones out of my ears while I was using them and broke them by repeatedly whipping me in the face with them, then followed it up by punching me a few times in the face. The last instance was about 4 to 5 months ago. I moved out and she regularly contacts me demanding money. I really hope you aren't giving her any money, my friend. We weren't allowed to have food upstairs, but I had food wrappers in my trash can, so they searched my whole room, ripping clothes off hangers, throwing stuff out of drawers, etc. And for 3 months, I wasn't allowed in my room for anything, unless accompanied by one of them. I had to sleep on the couch. I don't understand how parents can take stuff to such an extreme and still think that they're doing right by their child. I have a literal book worth of stories of the abuse I survived through. But one time, Dr. Phil's show told my mother that having a bed was a luxury for kids. So she immediately took mine away. I slept on a cold wood floor until I escaped that hellhole and cut off all contact. My dorm in college was the first real bed I'd slept in for 10 years. I didn't own a bed when I moved into my first apartment after college, so I was back on the wood floor. I'd moved in with the clothes on my back, my cat and her stuff, and my laptop, which I used to make money by transcribing at night, while I worked for $7 an hour, 12 hours a week at a deli. It was the only place that would hire me since I didn't have access to my own car. I cried myself to sleep every night on that wood floor. It was a reminder of how much I'd failed, leaving myself back in that position. My roommate must have heard me crying one night and figured it was back pain, because they lent me an air mattress to sleep on. It was like I'd moved into a 4-star hotel. Eventually, I saved up a spare $50 and bought a bed off Craigslist. Sketchy, but I hadn't owned my own bed in 16 years before that. I still have the bed and refuse to part with it because I don't want to end up on the floor again. I have many chronic back problems that I don't think will ever be fixed due to being forced to sleep on the floor starting at age 7. I take pain meds when I can and do yoga, but it doesn't help. Sometimes when I can't sleep in my normal bed, I find myself defaulting to the floor. When I wake up, I cry because I'm worried I'll always be like this. Parents have no idea how much they can mess up their kids. Ah yes, Dr. Phil. Responsible for a good amount of parental abuse, I'm pretty sure. This one time, I didn't want to finish drinking my milk, so my dad threw the cup across the room, shattering it and getting milk everywhere, while he proceeded to flip my chair over while I was still in it. He then crouched over my body saying, "You want to mess with me?" a bunch, and stormed out telling me to clean up the mess. And just lots more stuff like that. I once said whatever to my dad in a Bubba Gump's restaurant on vacation in Hawaii. He proceeded to scream at me and yelled at me to get out of the restaurant. I just sat there, mortified, and he left instead. I got grounded from an end of the year party when I was 11 for getting a B on a paper, even though I still got all A's. I was devastated. It was thrown by my best friend, and I was never allowed to do anything, and I'd been looking forward to it all year. I had the perfect dress to wear because my aunt's mother had taken me shopping and bought this cool dress that made me feel like Molly Ringwald. I had never been allowed to wear it before, and it had been in my closet since September. I was seriously having a Cinderella moment, although I honestly related more to Jane Eyre because I was adopted and a bookworm. The day of the party comes around and I'm bawling. I'm a good kid. I try to be perfect every waking moment. Now I'm grounded from my best friend's party. The mom of my best friend knows how tough it is at home. I'm screamed at, belittled, hit all the time. This party was a beacon. My friend's mom barges into my house, tells me to get ready and get my stuff together because I'll be spending the night. My mom protests. How about I call CPS about the 50 cats in your house? I end up going to the party and she teaches me to be a badass. I had all the usual punishments. No video games for a week, no TV for X nights, no pocket money this week, groundings, you name it, I probably had it at one point or another. One particular punishment tops the rest though for creativity and cruelty. One day I was at a friend's place with my parents and discovered that if we opened his bedroom window all the way, we could squeeze out of it and climb onto his roof. His bedroom was on the second floor of their house, and they lived on top of a hill. So if we had fallen, we would have fallen probably 7 to 8 meters and then tumbled another 20 to 30 to the bottom of the hill. Anyway, both sets of parents walk outside at one point and hear us talking from the roof. They flip their lids and call us back inside. We scramble back into his bedroom and are sitting there terrified when our parents storm in. We get called down into the kitchen and are told to sit down at the kitchen table and await our punishment. My friend's dad opens up the pantry and starts pulling things out to make a sandwich. Then it hits us like a ton of bricks. Our punishment is to eat a sandwich made of the most ill-complementing, grotesque food combinations that he had at his disposal. The final product ended up being an unholy blend of Vegemite, oysters, anchovies, cheese, creamed corn, raw beef mince, and hot English mustard. I actually don't recall what it tasted like, other than being awful. Looking back on it as an adult, I reckon it was just as much for their entertainment than our punishment. But damn if it wasn't creative. For me, it was always the wooden spoon. I got the wooden spoon until I was probably 15. Then, when my mom broke it over my backside because I wouldn't stop laughing, she moved to the metal one. Standing in the corner was another big one. My youngest sister got smart though and would get the corner where she could see the TV. So that was exchanged for flat walls on your knees, Malcolm in the Middle style. Another weird one I got was when my sister and I wouldn't stop fighting, my mom made us sit next to each other holding hands and not speaking for hours on end. I couldn't drink water from my bathroom. My bathroom genuinely had colder water, and the best water in the house. My mom got suspicious when I'd leave to my bathroom for a few seconds every few minutes. I don't know what she possibly thought I was doing with it, but no more bathroom water, and I had to drink lukewarm peasant water like the rest of my family. This one's pretty tame, but honestly just doesn't make sense. Who cares if that's the water they want to drink? I also agree, bathroom water, for whatever reason, tends to be better than kitchen water. I grew up the firstborn son of an officer in the Air Force in the Bible Belt. I was an extremely inquisitive child, and mentioned anything weird I found that didn't make sense in the Bible, resulting in a beating either with a belt or a wooden spoon with my pants down. I wasn't allowed to play Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or anything, as it was all satanic. So, of course now I play a boatload of Japanese card games and escapist video games, listen to obnoxious screaming noises, and have a healthy interest in European occultism. Go me, I guess. What's an experience you and a friend shared where you both silently agreed to never speak of it again? In grade school, a friend tried to make his pee hole bigger with an Allen key. I told him he shouldn't try, but he did anyway. There was a lot of blood, and it was pretty messed up. He just wrapped his bits in toilet paper, and nothing was said of the incident ever again. What the? Why would you even do that? I slept with a female friend of mine at her brother's birthday party. I ended up finishing all over a huge beanbag. After we got cleaned up and everything, we hung out. Her brother and his 11-year-old friends come running in, and they start jumping on the beanbag that we forgot to clean. After jumping around for a bit, a lot of them started noticing wet spots on each other. We told them we spilled water and have not had a conversation about it to this day. I, female, semi-drunkenly hooked up with one of my guy friends, who I'd known for a long time. He has some really tiny equipment, maybe 2 to 3 inches erect. He was really nervous about it, but I didn't really mind since he was quite good at other stuff. The next morning, we were cuddling in bed and he begged me not to tell any of our friends about our hookup or his size. We're still good friends and his secret will always be safe with me. I went streaking with my male friend while very drunk. His big-boobed girlfriend decided to join in the nudity. I said she had some nice ones once they're revealed. My friend decides he doesn't like me ogling her jumblies and decides to fight me. Let the drunken nude wrestling begin. Back in middle school, a friend and I, both girls, used to sit on the couch in my basement and use one of those giant yoga balls to press into each other's crotches to get off. It felt great, and we would softly talk dirty to each other the whole time. This happened 2 or 3 times she came over. Haven't talked about it since. When I was nearing the end of my freshman year of college, a few friends of mine dropped acid one Sunday afternoon. The acid was apparently very strong, and all but one of them went off trip-a-dip-a-doodling on their merry way. The one I speak of got stuck in his own head and was found wandering through the halls, buck naked with a blank expression on his face. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, this was during family visit weekend. Anyways, after a couple of friends and I grab a towel and corral my fried friend into a dorm room, he proceeds to sit on a bed and stare out the window, still completely naked. Being the responsible person I am, I realize that he's so out of touch with reality to the point that he may accidentally hurt himself if left alone. So I tell the gathering crowd that I'll stay with him and they can go enjoy the beautiful Sunday Santa Cruz afternoon. I then grabbed the nearest smoking device and got incredibly stoned while I had to stare 4 hours at my naked friend on LSD while he worked his way out of his psychedelic pickle. Several people casually walked into the room, stared at my friend, stared at me, laughed, and then turned around and left during this time. A few hours into my marathon pot-laden babysitting venture, he looked over at me, stood up to put his pants on, and said, "That was really weird. We haven't mentioned it since." I walked in on my roommate and good friend taking care of himself. I saw everything. He'll occasionally try to jokingly bring it up when we're drunk or something, but I shut him down. Always. I'd rather just pretend it never happened. I, male, was probably 7 years old and at my male best friend's house playing Mario Kart, and we caught his mom giving my dad a BJ. Proceeded to act it out and get caught by them. They were peeved, but agreed to say nothing on the agreement we said nothing to our other parents. Didn't really help. Both marriages were crap. I'm sorry, what do you mean you proceeded to act it out? Never mind, I don't want to know. I, a straight male, had been drinking heavily with some friends all day and had recently returned from a nighttime skinny dip. I, being too drunk to get dressed, was just in a towel. We were all around the fire when I start to feel a bit sick. I end up accidentally dropping my towel and half crawling over to one of the girls, throwing up on her while halfway across. Apparently, every time I would heave, I would thrust a bit, so my bits were slapping her in the face. I woke up naked, spooning another friend's boyfriend in their tent with no recollection of the night's events. This would count, except they all seemed to never shut up about it. I mean, if I woke up in that situation, I definitely have some questions. So yes, please talk to me about it. What the heck happened? A buddy of mine was driving with me as a passenger. We went down the road near his house along the lake when he says, "Check her out. A woman in a bikini is going down for a swim. What a butt." He slowed down so I could roll down the window and do a catcall. We were stupid 17-year-olds. I was leaning out the window yelling, "Woo, baby, nice butt." She turned around and it was his mom. Nothing too crazy, but my best friend has never kissed a guy and she was afraid she would mess it up, so she begged me to teach her first. I'm a girl, by the way. I agreed, and I knew she was nervous, so we had a few glasses of wine first and then we tried to practice. I lean in to kiss her and she giggles, which makes me laugh. After several unsuccessful tries, we actually managed lip contact for about half a minute. I was really proud of her because I knew she was nervous. She suddenly bursts into tears and gets snot all over me, and cries about being a bad friend asking me to do this. I probably shouldn't have given her so much to drink in hindsight. We never speak of it only because we know we'll just laugh too much and she's mortified. On a college trip abroad, my best friend and I head up to our hotel room. We get asked by one of our tutors to get our other tutor from his room. We knock on the door and realize it's ajar. We sheepishly head inside quietly and spot a big bag of white powder on the bed with lines on the sideboard. Glance at each other, shake our heads, walk out and get pizza. I was at my friend's house at around the age of 13. We're making tea and I open the cupboard for a mug. Inside is a Tupperware box with a large square tinfoil packet, around the size of a 5-kilo bag of sugar, and a bunch of little bags of brown powder. I take the cups out and close the cupboard and don't say a word. 10 years on and we've still never discussed it, and I don't think I've talked about it with anyone else either. Interestingly, his dad's a great guy and has been a very hands-on father despite divorcing my friend's mom. My best friend's husband hit on me a month before the wedding. We had all been drinking that night. He was wasted, and I was slightly tipsy but fully aware. I told him off and told him if I ever found out he tried that with another girl, I'd rip his appendage off. I was maid of honor at the wedding and I never told her. I thought about it, but they had already bought a house together. The wedding was set and she was just so happy. I put it out of my mind and pretended it never happened, and I'm glad I did. They were married for 5 years before she got brain cancer and died, leaving behind a daughter. He was the most doting husband during the 7 months she wasted away and is a truly amazing father. He's remarried now and the most loyal man I've ever met. If I had taken his one idiot move as the basis for his life, I could quite possibly have ruined a lot for him and her. I was unsure if I was doing the right thing at the time, but now I know it was definitely the best thing to do. Wow, that one really took a turn I was not expecting. Goes to show you though, sometimes good people just make mistakes. I had a drunken 5-way with my roommate, his girlfriend, and another couple. 3 guys, 2 girls. We all ended up blacking out and only had vague memories of strip poker and awkwardness in the morning. Until we found the video. We all decided to delete the video and never talk about it ever again. The next month was very quiet. In 7th grade, my best friend and I were playing basketball at the park. I had to poo so bad, but the closest toilet was across the street. So I stopped and pulled my shorts away from my body and let the poop fall without touching my shorts. We walked away casually and no one saw. Ew, come on, man. Just hold it till you get there. A few years ago, I was at a party and had gone with a longtime female friend. All was well at first, but as the night went on, we both had a bit too much to drink. Her boyfriend of over 2 years had suddenly dumped her by text, and I had just found out my girlfriend had cheated on me. I say this because we were both dancing and both buzzed and emotionally unstable. As a joke, she grinds into me, laughing as she does it, but I start getting aroused and grind back. I suddenly realize what I'm doing and back off. But her face is red and she's visibly aroused. She pulls me into the bathroom and we proceed to get to business. Not super hot, lustful animal stuff, but we both enjoyed it and make out for a few minutes, then we both duck out, using the excuse I had to hold her hair as she puked. The hostess, a mutual friend, offered us to stay the night, which we took her up on. She passed out and I was having a heart attack. We were buzzed. What if she freaks out? Did I just ruin a 7-year-long close friendship just to feel good and make our exes angry? A million things ran through my mind, and I eventually nodded off. I woke up an hour later with her sprawled on me, which is fine. We've shared a bed more than a few times. She wakes up and blinks, looks at me and goes, "What the hell? Buy me dinner first next time, dork." She ends it with a laugh, but my face must have been ghost white. She hugs me and says, "Two consenting adults had fun. Plus, hey, better someone I know and trust rather than some weird jerk who might have tried something weird. We're still friends, okay? If you need to be alone, I understand." I hug her back and ask her if she's up for some IHOP. All is well and we're still best of friends and hang out regularly. That was about 2 years ago, and we both haven't said a word about it. We traded drunken, confusing oral at the tender age of 16. He initiated it, but I didn't need much persuading. Felt great at the time, but 10 minutes later started a spiral of self-doubt and confusion that lasted about a year. Worked it out in the end. He went on to marry a woman. I'm in a civil partnership with a man. We never mentioned it after that night, and given I moved away a few years later, plus, his lady wife, it's unlikely to ever be spoken of again, except here, now. When I was about 4 years old or so, I had a best friend whose name shall not be disclosed. We'll call him Tom. Tom and I lived in the same neighborhood, so we had plenty of opportunities to stay over at each other's houses while our mothers jibber-jabbed in the next room. When we were at my house, we played in the basement, which was outfitted as a playroom, with trains and Legos and all sorts of fun things, like markers. So he and I are downstairs in the playroom and he decides that he's done with the trains, so he picks up an orange marker. We didn't have any paper, so he finds this felt dartboard and colors on the white cardboard backing. I want to get along with him, so I do the same, choosing a green marker. Well, he soon gets bored with this as well, but he thinks the colors would look cooler if the lights were out. So he waddles up to the light switch, climbs on top of the toy chest, and turns off the lights. The colors do indeed look cooler. Of course, coloring is only so much fun when one is full of chocolate milk. So we both get up and walk over to where we tossed our socks earlier. I don't remember why we took off our socks, but it must have been something they said because we immediately peed all over them. Our socks were soon thoroughly soaked with our urine. This gave Tom an idea. He looked down at his mini member and thought to himself, "Know what would look really cool if it were orange?" At least, I assume that's what he was thinking, because he then started coloring his bits orange. Maybe he just wanted a better tan. And of course, Tom is absolutely right. It does look cooler. But you know what's cooler than orange? Green. Green is much cooler than orange. So I proceed to color my own willy green. Cue our Catholic mothers. Tom's mother is absolutely horrified. At least, that's what my own mother tells me. To be honest, I don't remember much after coloring the felt dartboard. My own mother, thankfully, I guess, took a much more humorous approach. She thought it was hysterical. Anyway, they took us upstairs to the bathroom and made us wash our little dongs in the bathtub, while my mother washed and dried our socks. After that, Tom and his mom went home. I've never heard anything about that incident from anybody aside from my mother, and vague memories are my only assurance that the story is true. In any case, neither Tom nor I have ever spoken of it, nor will I ever, except to my fiancé, because if I don't, my mother will. Come on, Ma, be cool around the fiancé. When I was 15, my friend Gerald was staying over for the weekend. It was the typical Friday night. We were up playing video games on my N64, hanging out, and watching random horror movies at a low volume with the dialogue replaced with our own snarky narration while he browsed the net on my computer. This would be rude ordinarily, but he didn't have a computer or the internet at his home, and it was an opportunity for him to get some exposure to both. We were playing Gauntlet Legends when he paused the game and looked at me. "Dude, your arm's bleeding." "Oh, I must have gotten myself on a tree while I was dirt biking. It's nothing. I'm fine. Now let's kill some dwarves." We started up again, but I could see him looking at my arm every few minutes out of the corner of my eye. He paused the game again and dropped the controller between his knees. "So if you don't tell me what's actually wrong, I'm waking up your mom." "I'm fine." "Dude, cut it out. When you got up to grab a drink, your sleeve pulled up and I saw him." I sat there for a bit, closed my eyes and sighed. He knew, so there was no point in hiding it or keeping up the charade. He lifted my sleeve as I sat there and hung my head quietly, then backed away in hushed silence. When I looked up to make eye contact, his eyes were rimmed with tears. "Why would you do that to yourself, man? Those aren't clean lines. You carved them with something. It's complicated." "Then uncomplicate it for me." So I told him the truth. I was deeply depressed. My family was disintegrating, and it was the only way to get that kind of bottled emotional pain out of my system. I was halfway through explaining myself when he wrapped his arms around me and hugged the breath out of me. "I love you, original poster. Not in a gay way. You're my best friend and you're like a brother to me. I'm there for you, man. Just don't do this again, alright? I won't tell anyone, but you'd better promise me that you'll call me the next time it gets that bad." The rest of the night was understandably strained. No matter how we tried to forget it all, the elephant was still in the room. We never spoke about it again. He did his best to pretend nothing had happened the next day and would flat out not acknowledge my wounds. Okay, to anyone that's going through anything like this, there's always someone that wants to hear from you. Even if you don't feel like you have a close friend, there are numbers that you can call and people that you can talk to. Please, take care of yourself and love yourself. Kindly, a random stranger on the internet. 6th grade, outdoor school. Him and I ate a lot of pudding. A load of pudding. That night, we both book it to the bathroom, almost pooping our pants. We get to the toilets and just let it rip, and holy crap did we crap. We're sitting in adjacent stalls and we're just laughing our butts off at the sound of each other's poop. Think like fire hoses. Good stuff. We decided to never speak about that again, but really it's not that bad. Pretty funny. Me and my friend were both maybe 8 or 9, and we were watching adult content in his basement. He says, "This might seem weird, but when I watch this or see a hot girl, my thing gets real hard and bigger." I say, having knowledge of this for some reason, "It gets hard so it will fit into the girl's stuff. A soft one would probably just mush to the side." I pretty much gave my friend the talk because his dad never did, or never got the chance, because he died when we were 12. In high school, a friend had a party at his place. I had pre-gamed and drank a bit too much too fast and spent a majority of the party laying on the couch with my head spinning. As the party died down a bit, a good female friend, I'm male, came over and started rubbing my head and shoulders and asking if I felt okay. The party host announced he was going downstairs with his girlfriend and not to come down there unless you wanted to join. I looked up at my friend and asked if she wanted to go downstairs on a silly whim. She agreed, which caught me completely by surprise. I had no idea how much she had to drink either, but alas, we went down to the basement as well. I don't even know what I was expecting. When we got there, my friend's bedroom door was closed and locked, and he promptly told us to go away. Her and I went over to his couch and sat down together. I don't even know how it started. We just started making out. Nothing serious, just some hand stuff. We went to the bathroom, cleaned up, and literally never spoke a word about it, ever again. So I'm part of this 3-man best friend group thing. We'll call these 2 best friends D and M. They're both like brothers to me, and we've known each other for around a decade. We're all in our early 20s. The kind of friendship where we can and do talk about anything without discomfort. We cannot be uncomfortable around each other anymore. One of our random guy talks goes in the direction of sexuality one day, and I mention the idea that I'm probably bi. There's a point that's made relating back to the fact that we have this 3-way bromance going on where we joke about being lovers and stuff. And there was a tongue-in-cheek joke rumor that I was secretly dating D in high school. So it's funny that I'm not straight. Funny, one day I'm hanging out with D and just chatting. Topic of sex stuff comes up. He asks me about my bi-ness. Asks if I've ever thought about him or M in that way. Oh man, I know you're just curious, but come on. This isn't gonna end well. I go for honesty and openness and he responds in kind, because we're the kind of guys that can speak honestly without awkwardness. No need to dress things up. So we talk frankly about the theoretical idea of the two of us as a romantic couple, on the assumption that speaking about it seriously doesn't mean we're serious about it. We get stuck on this topic and somehow come to the conclusion that we wouldn't make a bad couple. Too bad he isn't into guys, right? Long story short, it ends up being a long night. And the more he thinks about it, the more he doesn't see such a problem with the idea. I knew we were tight, but this is something else. He's similarly surprised by how much the idea doesn't faze him, and within a couple hours, our tone moves from neutral comments stemming from simple curiosity to a pretty serious discussion that sounds like he might try to take it somewhere. I don't know what happened, seriously, but suddenly it's like 1 a.m. in the morning and he straight up asks me out, completely serious. As far as I know, the dude's completely straight, and I've been best friends with him for half my life. Suddenly, he's telling me he thinks he loves me, and it feels so natural to say that, and why didn't he say it sooner? And I'm sorry, man, but I don't see you in that way. Emotional intimacy is one thing, and we got that going for us. You're a cool guy, really, but I can't accept this. I just can't see you in that way at this point. I can't. It's never been brought up again. Wood movie had a happy ending until you consider what had to happen next. At the end of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you just know that Cameron is going to get his butt whooped by his dad. Braveheart. I mean, the movie is historically inaccurate, but it ends at the Battle of Bannockburn, where the narrator says they won their freedom, but that freedom only lasted like 5 years before war broke out again. Breakfast Club. Bender most likely went home and got beaten by his dad again after the movie ended. The Truman Show. This guy has no idea what the real world is like and he's just thrown into it. Most people have 18 years of preparation. If we're being honest here, he probably sued the crap out of them, so I'm sure Truman was living in luxury afterwards. Lawyers would be jumping to take this case. The Day After Tomorrow. It isn't hugs and giggles. Things do not go back to normal. The human race got slapped hard. Much of the upper hemisphere is covered in ice. Let's not mince words. A few billion people died. Whole nations were wiped off the map. Yes, you have survivors, but now this problem. Food. A huge section of the world's agriculture was taken away. How are you going to feed the remaining masses? This doesn't include shelter. Those lucky ones who are on the edge of the frost are going to move further down, South America and Africa. While true, the ice will melt eventually, this massive snowfront will have a huge effect on global climates. Everything will be colder, sunlight being reflected off the surface rather than absorbed. The survivors will have such terrible hardships ahead. It will take a generation or more to bounce back. We're not even talking about political turmoil. Warlords, tyrants, and dictators will rise to power. Wars over limited resources. The movie ends with our gang getting picked up by what remains of the US government. The future is so uncertain. Many more will perish from harsh weather, starvation, sickness, and/or hostilities. We don't just hold hands and sing Kumbaya. The human race will suffer with huge blood losses to come. I think I kind of want to see this sequel now. The Day After Tomorrow. WALL-E. It would still take decades before the people were actually able to live off the earth, and their quality of life would still be awful compared to their lives in the ship. Monsters Inc. There's a reason they made a prequel and not a sequel. Laughter being 10 times more powerful means a lot of factory monsters would have lost their jobs, even accounting for the energy crisis. Rent. Mimi has AIDS. She'll definitely be dead soon. Roger and Collins have HIV in the 80s. They'll probably be dead soon. Mark is all alone and is gonna watch his best friends die. Joanne and Maureen might get a happy ending though. Yeah, the characters in Rent get it pretty rough. The Sound of Music. The nuns were almost definitely executed by the Nazis as soon as it became apparent they helped the family escape. Almost any horror movie where one character makes it through the entire movie and is the last man standing, actually usually a female, covered in blood and surrounded by dead bodies. What happens when the police arrive? Yeah, I can't say that looks good. Whiplash. Outwardly, it seems like a happy ending. Andrew proves Fletcher wrong and showcases his abilities as a musician. However, that's exactly what Fletcher wanted, and proved that his abusive teaching style works. All Fletcher wanted was his Charlie Parker. That's why he was so angry when his former student died. He thought he was going to fill that role. When Andrew begins his solo, at first Fletcher is clearly mad and confused. But as Andrew continues, Fletcher guides him, and the movie ends with them sharing eye contact before finishing the song. With this, Andrew becomes his Charlie Parker, something Fletcher can put on a pedestal and say, I created that talent. You also have to consider what happens to Andrew after this. He goes right back into the abuse he suffered from under Fletcher, and loses all the love and enjoyment that he has for jazz music. In my opinion, I see Andrew having a similar fate with either the real Charlie Parker, a heroin addict who died of overdose at 34, or Fletcher's former student who took their own life. Zootopia. The whole plot of the movie hinges on reshaping the natural order by all living in unity. That's great. Right until you realize that herbivores are still super good at reproducing to make up for carnivores, as shown by the rabbit population sign counter going up at a ridiculous rate gag. Except nobody's eating them anymore. By the end of the movie, it's also revealed that there's herbivore extremists which want to take it further and get rid of carnivores. Overpopulation and possibly genocide is on its way. Kate and Leopold. Kate finds out that she can't vote or own property anymore now that she's living in the past. Also, she has to live with the knowledge that she porked her own grandson. The Avengers. Everyone's sitting around having coffee and they're still pulling bodies out of the rubble. Back to the Future. Marty is now essentially living with a family of strangers. It's not going to take them long to realize he has no knowledge of any conversation they've ever had or anything they've ever done together. Also, let's just keep that guy who tried to assault your mom around so we can wash our car. And why does our son seem to look exactly like that guy from high school? Finding Nemo. How do the fish get out of those plastic bags? They're probably dead. One of them even says, "Now what?" Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It seems as though they were meant for each other because even with no memory of each other, they still find each other and fall in love. As the movie foreshadows with repeating or glitching the last shot of the film, they're doomed to a cycle of meeting, falling in love, breaking up, heartbreak, erasing their memories about each other, and repeat. This one is heavily implied by the movie, but yes, you do need to kind of play past the movie in your head to really get the full impact of the ending. Get Out. This whole white family is murdered and the only survivor is a blood-soaked black guy in the uppity suburbs. Seriously, good movie. One of the best I've seen in years. But I left the theater and the first thing I said to my husband was, that investigation is not going to go well for him. Donnie Darko. Clearly, there are multiple people in that universe who have succumbed to an unfortunate fate they have no control over in order to save the world. The Road to El Dorado. There's a decent chance that Miguel and Tulio carried germs to the city that the natives have no immunity against. And there's an extremely high chance that Shell will pick something up if they take her back to Europe, or to any of the other colonies. The Never-Ending Story. Read the title. It's gonna come back around again, and worse, on an infinite loop, long after you switched that VHS tape out and went to bed. That gut-wrenching scene with the horse near the start, doomed to repeat. Beauty and the Beast. They had to start their life together without any furniture in that entire castle. Not having any furniture isn't that big of a deal. Considering all the servants were turned into furniture, I think the West Wing being full of shredded corpses is a bigger problem. Dirty Dancing. It ends on a happy note, but we all know they're not able to be together after the family leaves. My girlfriend in high school loved that movie, and every time she made me watch it, at the very end I always said, and they never saw each other again. The one that annoys me the most, even if I really enjoyed the movie, is Kingsman. The villain succeeded. Imagine living in a world where electronics can cause rage-inducing feelings. People would be abandoning technology in a world that isn't prepared for that. I mean, sure, people can romanticize living in the Wild West or hunter-gatherer, but there's a reason why people weren't considered adults until 13-ish. They didn't know how to succeed in that life until 10 years or so of training. Now you're dumping the entire Western Western technocrat society into such a state. They can't survive. On top of this, if Sam Jackson's penetration into various world leaders is as ubiquitous as it seemed, that also means that there was no one left to take command of the chaos. He didn't target just politicians, but performers and celebrities too. With people jokingly saying how The Rock should run for office and how people praise Schwarzenegger's reign as congressman, it's obvious that charismatic celebrities can use that to obtain positions of power. Except they're all dead. Anybody who lived on the East Coast from the Great Blackout back in 2003 would remember how tense things were after a few days. Now, instead, there's no one figuring out how to turn the lights back on. Plus, there isn't a few days of grace before people get violent. The violence has already happened. So, to set the stage, you have a population that just began attacking each other from technology. When they stop and look around, some old rivalries might have been reignited. On top of this, people are going to drop technology and live a life they're not prepared for. There will be no leadership or voice due to their eradication, which means that people are going to have to determine who's a leader. That is rarely peaceful. I know that there's a Kingsman too, but let's be honest, this is probably how things would have played out. Michael Banks from Mary Poppins is exactly the right age to grow up and be killed in the First World War. Passengers. Even if you ignore the Stockholm-driven relationship, the couple spent decades filling the spaceship with plants. As the roots of those trees grow, there's a massive risk of them rupturing vital supply lines. Or even worse, making a hole that leads out into the vacuum of space. Plant roots will push through concrete. That spaceship is beyond screwed. If humidity in the air was increased, there's also a huge amount of rusting that could happen. And that's ignoring that the couple spent decades eating the food supplies. The food supplies were supposed to be enough for a few thousand people for a few months. 2 people eating into that for decades, plus everything that got wasted during the film, means that inventory is massively depleted. Basically, if you woke up on that ship, there's a really good chance you'd die, either of starvation or the ship degrading because of all that plant life. The 2 main characters put 5,000 lives in serious jeopardy. Frozen. Number 1, the queen very likely can't sleep with her husband without killing him. Therefore, she can't breed. And even if she can, who knows what kind of mutant baby she'd spawn. Number 2, Anna can't marry Kristoff if the traditions of royalty in that country follow the vast majority of royalty traditions I've ever heard of. And number 3, the country was frozen over for at least a week or 2 with thick snow in the middle of growing season. Those people are gonna starve to death. I won't lie, I never thought about the food situation in Frozen. You're probably right there. War games. I've always been curious what happens to Lightman after the WOPR decides that the only winning move is not to play. He obviously had such a big role in helping to avert nuclear war that they had to let him go. But how do you release a 17-year-old back into the world after seeing all of that top secret stuff? My personal headcanon? McKittrick releases David with no charges, telling him in so many words, "Thanks for your help, don't hack anymore, but go study computer science at university. You might have a promising career ahead of you." Django Unchained. Sure, he's an amazing gunslinger at the end of the film, but he's in the South, pre-Civil War. He just killed a prominent plantation owner and everyone on the plantation. Just the sight of an African American on a horse stopped people in their tracks. And that was with Schultz claiming to be somewhat of a master. But now it's just him and his wife. I'd like to add, I love this movie, but if you think about it, after what happened in Django, I can't see him lasting long. Trainspotting. Even though Mark is totally supposed to be an anti-hero, you find yourself rooting for him throughout the film. After he screws the other guys over and is literally running away from all his problems, declaring that he's going to change his life for the better, you think just for a second that he was being honest, until you realize that he's a heroin addict with a duffel bag full of cash. Logan. Even though the kids get away, Laura will eventually be like her dad, the Wolverine, with her body and healing factor weakening as she gets older due to the adamantium in her. Cue a whole bunch of arguments in the comments under this post right now. Risky Business kind of sets Tom Cruise's character up for terrible decisions because he gets away with everything. Alien Resurrection. The size of that explosion as the spaceship hits Earth indicates major atmospheric turmoil, dust being whirled up, etc., akin to a nuclear winter. Goodbye crops worldwide. Graduate. I thought it was a happy ending until my history teacher explained what their expressions on the bus at the end meant. Those two are basically screwed. No job, no car, no money, no family. Jurassic World. Frustrated me that the main characters literally walked off into the sunset. No, don't turn this into a happy ending. Hundreds of people died. And can you imagine the lawsuit that's gonna happen? My personal opinion, none of the Jurassic Park movies are worth watching after the first one. In Kill Bill, Beatrix kills him, but probably has a ton of assassins who are constantly trying to kill her now. And now she has a daughter. Things will just get more complicated. For this one, there's also the much-loved fan theory that the little girl from the first one will come back and try to kill Beatrix eventually. I kind of like that idea for a sequel, if they ever decide to do one. Elysium. Nice. Make people live longer in an already dangerously overpopulated world. Can't wait for the food shortages, power shortages, water shortages, and so on. Yeah, I don't know if they really thought that one through. Transcendence. Will uploads the virus to save Max. This instantly bricks the world's computers and deletes the internet. There's definitely going to be major implications because of this. Ghost. Patrick Swayze happily goes off to ghost heaven, having just sentenced Demi Moore to a life of solitude and celibacy because she knows he's waiting for her. Gravity. For a start, she's stuck miles from anywhere, weak, no map, shoes, food, or drinkable water. And even if the capsule is sending out an alert, there's no reason to assume it would be picked up, as there's no satellites to get the signal. Plus, the Chinese, whose Soyuz it was, would probably assume it was empty, because for some reason there was nobody on their space station. A lot of Ewoks died due to the raining debris from a recently obliterated Death Star shortly after the end of Return of the Jedi. It seemed like Jesse got a happy ending at the end of Breaking Bad, until you think about how his fingerprints are definitely all over that meth lab. Did Jesse get a happy ending? I don't know, dude had it pretty rough. The Island. You just released a couple thousand burdens to the state, crippled an enormous company, destabilized the economy, and put thousands of people out of work. Not to mention the unfathomable legal complications of having a couple thousand clones running around. Whenever I watch this movie, I definitely have that same thought, that there's definitely gonna be some problems now that a bunch of rich and famous people's clones are running around the world. Harry Potter. Okay, so Voldy's dead, but now you have a world which is split down the middle and in a huge mess. People died over the year and in the Battle of Hogwarts. The Ministry would be so ruined from the year of management, and employees would be turning on one another. The wizarding world of Britain would need to rebuild from the ground up. Everything and everyone will be seeking recompense, and Harry would have a horrid time of it. He's the savior, and people will want to meet him, to thank him, to sob sad stories, and the families of the Death Eaters will either want to kill him or try to ask him to help their family members. Yeah, it would definitely be a bumpy road for the Ministry of Magic for quite a while after all the events that took place. Case 39. The monster is dead, but Emily's life is ruined. Her friends are dead. All potential witnesses are dead. Her friends and colleagues are gonna sue the pants off her and put her in jail because she killed an innocent girl who had already been through so much. Her career is as dead as the monster. There's nothing she can do to convince the society at large now, even though she saved them all. American Beauty always unsettled me because Kevin Spacey finally finds peace, but his daughter and her boyfriend next door are going to prison for his murder. Hitch. The dude lost his entire business and everyone is questioning their relationships. I'm not sure what he's gonna do with no work. The girl is a reporter who almost lost her job. I don't think she can take over payments for his place. Hey, Hitch is a pretty smooth guy. I'm sure he'll find some work somewhere. The Matrix Revolutions. The Oracle admits that the peace brought with Neo's sacrifice is only temporary. It was a crappy ending to begin with, though. Deep Impact. There's no way the world was peaceful, despite that rousing speech from Morgan Freeman. The Golden Compass. In the movie, the characters look into the blazing sunset while the music swells. In the book, a boy is ripped apart under the cover of darkness, perhaps 12 hours or less later. Ponyo. The world is really messed up by the events of the movie. Ponyo gets to be human and to be with her love, but the world is put back to the Dark Ages, with most of it underwater and prehistoric sea life roaming the waters. All farming is destroyed, no satellites, industry drowned. When the petrol available is consumed, what then? Hairspray. The main characters get together, but Tracy was still wanted by the police for assault and evading arrest. She was definitely caught when the cameras turned off. Training Day. There's no way the three wise men and Alonzo's crew would have let Jake live after what he's seen. Drop Dead Fred. The imaginary friends are sent to children to overcome problems in their lives. Fred is sent to Mickey's daughter. What are her problems? And how come Mickey didn't recognize the name Drop Dead Fred, even though he remembered it from childhood earlier on? Independence Day. Can you imagine cleaning up after every major city in the world has been destroyed? Sure, the aliens are gone, but you still have to clean up 1 billion bodies and spend $1 gazillion trying to fix things. Groundhog Day. The guy has spent years living an essentially consequence-free existence. The switch to Iron Man mode is going to be jarring and probably fatal for him and or people around him. Forrest Gump. When you realize that Forrest is left alone with Forrest Jr. to take care of, and that both of them are going to be coping with AIDS in a time that the disease was completely maligned. The Pursuit of Happiness. Everyone is all happy that Will Smith gets the job, but they all seem to forget it's just an internship, an unpaid internship. He's still broke. He's still homeless. A few weeks of no showers, bad sleep, and no food, and he'll be fired and back in the same position he was. Death Proof. All the women would be arrested, convicted, and imprisoned for that car chase where they hit other cars that ended with them beating a man to death when he was lying on the ground helpless. Step Brothers. The guys start to grow up and turn into exactly what they despised before, adult wage slaves. Running the karaoke business starts to get boring, so Brennan turns to drugs. As a result, his psychiatrist girlfriend leaves him, and he falls further into the throes of addiction. Dale is devastated when his father, Robert, passes away. The hijinks are over, and reality sets in for the brothers. They eventually fall out of touch with each other. Chris Kardashian continues to cyberbully them to their respective graves. Wow, you really brought a dark twist to a comedy movie there. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.